Happy New Year. Alright,
Oh, 2018 came fast.
good. We're good to start. Let's go.
It still
Then
says
someone start.
offline on my thing.
Yeah, it still says we're offline.
I
Fix
saw
it.
a play arrow jump.
Well, apparently the countdown was for nothing. G freaking G.
Wait,
We're gonna have
what?
to count down to 2019.
Oh,
then.
now it's live. Oh,
Yeah, let's
thank
go.
goodness.
Okay, now
Let's
we're
just
good.
start
Okay.
already.
Okay.
Nice.
We're all
Okay.
really late,
That's
so
good.
let's go. Okay, so where were we actually? Yeah, I think we're in.
Okay.
Let's do a redo. While we're at it, we should probably get the word out about the change.
I posted
Yeah.
in my group. I think Ollie posted in his group.
I did too, yeah.
Okay, we're good.
All right.
So,
So,
That was your test. Everyone who's listening has passed. Congratulations.
I already know 2 people in here, so that's already a good start.
just let me know when I should do the official welcome.
I see you, Grant. I see you. You're in the chat.
I'm gonna give people like a couple minutes just to show up.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I can feast on a giant pizza.
Oh, fuck yes.
Lucky
Pizzas are the best.
Krusty Krab pizza is a pizza.
Pizza?
You and me.
Oh, hey, ramen is here too. Sweet. I want to be officially welcome. Well, welcome here, Mimi Berry, to this very questionable quality stream of Thracia 776 or something. Hi. Hi. Okay. Hey, there's a bunch of people showing up here actually. I hope they'll stay. They should too.
The Leinster Crab pizza is the pizza for you and me.
Right.
Hi, Chloe. Are you happy now?
Wow. Nice.
So I have a question. Who is Guy's waifu? Is it Thracia 776? Is it Marina? Or is it Chloe? Or is it Severa?
Yes.
That's an excellent question.
I think Guy had the only reasonable answer to that question just now.
The Inception. It is a waifu within a waifu within a waifu.
The waifu wars. Simple as that.
Waifuception.
Waifuception too. That works. Okay, so
Alright. So, this good enough?
I think so. Maybe.
No,
Alright.
better. Yes, this is fine.
Alright.
I guess.
Welcome to the Thracia 776 podcast, everybody. I apologize earlier for my poor internet connection. I did not think it was going to work. It was going to have this problem. My name is Grant Boothe. I'm the whack job who decided to host this podcast and drag these poor fools into this.
Damn it.
I'm a lucky fool, not a poor fool, Grant.
We all poor.
Aw.
You're all
Oh, I'm poor.
I'm not
Okay,
even
yeah.
poor. That's the worst part. Anyways. So, guys, show yourself. Who are you?
I'm Guy. I'm the one who obsesses over this game unhealthfully.
That's not wrong.
That's a reputation for you. Hi guys, my name is John. Our former host Grant has kind of graciously asked me to moderate our discussion a little bit later today, so I'll be asking a lot of questions, and you'll hear a great deal from me. I'm sure you're pumped about that. I blog about Fire Emblem when I have the time, and eventually other games too at my little blog, which I'm happy to send you a link for, just to shoot in a little plug there for you.
Including Gaiden too. And oh shit, I think Grant went
Indeed.
offline. Grant went offline, guys. This
Uh
is bad.
oh.
Wow.
Hold on.
This
Hold
is
on.
going well, guys. Oh my god. Are you serious? Okay, this. Wow.
So while we wait for Grant to return, there he is.
I'm not dead.
You're not
I'm not
dead?
Hey, there we go.
Somebody had the staff.
Hey, I'm a Holy War fanboy. It's the Valkyrie staff.
Oh shit, my bad.
Yes, it's the Valkyrie staff. See, that was your
Definitely.
test to see if you remembered.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I feel
So
like
has everybody else introduced themselves?
I
know
did
Guy
not
did.
introduce myself. So
Okay.
hi everyone, I am the one that is finally seeing the stream after many technical difficulties. My name is Zoli Cat. I am known, kinda, sort of, known into the FA communities, I guess. Known for being also a former moderator in Fort Manx and also a kinda active member in other communities. And I just play Fire Emblem. Basically, it's a fun series. That's all I have to say. I actually, just as precision, I actually beat Thracia for the first time just for this podcast. So Thracia is extremely fresh on my memory, and even I actually literally completed the last chapter yesterday evening. That was an experience, let me tell you. Yeah, I think I
We got
presented
some.
myself way too long. It took way too long, but whatever. Let's go.
We got some awesome messages at like 1:30 a.m. from Oli. It was pretty great.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we even had a Rocky montage,
Oh
an
my
inside
God,
joke
yeah.
involving drawing iron swords. Yeah.
Bravo! Iron sword!
Iron sword! Draw iron sword!
Monster card!
Monster card! It doesn't matter if I win, lose, or draw monster card!
I was just referencing how I find it really weird that the final chapter still had iron swords to sell, and I was like, okay, why? And it just turned into a meme, so it was funny. Anyways, let's go. So,
First, what we'll do for this podcast is we will start with how we were introduced to Thracia 776. Guy, since you're the unofficial husband of Thracia, I figured you could start. And this, kids, is how I met your mother.
lol.
So, about 3 or 4 years back now, I initially picked up Awakening at the recommendation of a friend, and I loved that game. So then I wanted to know more about Fire Emblem, and I looked into the series past, and I played through the Game Boy Advance games, I played through the DS games, and then I got to the Super Famicom titles. I, at first, did not care very much for either Holy War or Thracia. But as I
That's a bit of a
matured, I looked into them a little deeper, and I really, really came to appreciate them. I think that much is obvious.
challenge. Oh yeah, that much is obvious indeed.
Truth be told, before I actually picked it up, I read up on how Thracia played on the wiki, and it sounded terrifying. It like fatigue, dismount. What is all of this? That doesn't sound like fun.
I also thought the same, so you're not alone for that.
But oh, was I wrong? So very wrong.
Mhm.
So, Guy, I'm curious just to dig into that a little bit. What was it that changed between your first playthrough of Thracia, where you were like, I'll take it or leave it, and your, what has since become your favorite game? How did it make that journey? What changed?
Well, I started looking at games a little bit differently. Firstly, when I first played it, I was a senior in high school. I, just kind of played games to play games. I didn't really analyze them or take much inspiration from them. I hadn't really played much outside of Pokemon at that point in my life anyway. But the next time I gave it a go, my outlook had totally changed, and I was really looking for how it used its gameplay to get its story across, and that's the big reason for me that I really love this game.
So basically, as soon as you look deeper into it, you felt that much more attachment to it.
I think looking at a complicated game like this on its surface level doesn't really do either you justice or the game justice. So when I was looking a little deeper, why do these mechanics exist? What is the point of everything the game is doing and making me do in it? That was where it started to click. The same thing happened with Holy War, and between the two of them, just they shot up my list, and now this game right here sits atop my list, and I say it's a masterpiece, a timeless classic.
I pretty much agree with most of it, actually. So, Grant, how did you discover Thracia 776?
So, my first game was Path of Radiance, then it was Blazing Sword, and then Sacred Stones. After that, I was on a Fire Emblem craze. I'm like, oh, come on. There have to be more Fire Emblem games. Radiant Dawn hadn't come out at this point, so I started going online, and I discovered there were these Japanese Fire Emblem games, and that's when I came across Holy War. And then after I beat Holy War, I found Thracia, and it was like, holy crap, and a Super Nintendo Fire Emblem game. Oh, heck yes. Hold on a sec. Oh, okay, good. It cut out, so I didn't know if I disconnected. Anyway, I'm a sucker for the SNES RPGs. I'm a huge fanboy of Chrono Trigger, of Final Fantasy VI, and Super Mario RPG. So the idea of a Super Nintendo... Yeah. So the idea of a Super Nintendo Fire Emblem game, I was just like fangasming. I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I didn't even know there was an English patch out. So I ended up playing both Holy War and Thracia in Japanese without knowing what the heck they were saying. I basically had to go online, and I had to look up stuff. So I had to look up capturing it. I had to figure out fatigue on my own.
Oh, but that sounds really like a nightmare. Wow.
It wasn't really all that bad now that I look back on it. It's like, oh, I can't use this unit. Huh, there must be some mechanic in this game where you can't use units every single time. And then I was able to piece together, I was like, oh, there's this little number at the bottom. I wonder what it does. So I figured out where the fatigue number came from. I figured out capturing. Yeah, so I figured all that out on my own, and then again, a lot of it too was the help of the save state emulators too. It was like, oh, okay, so that does that. This is weight, this is attack, and I even figured out that at that point I was starting to sense a pattern where it's like, okay, here's attack, here's items, here's healing, and so after that, the rest was pretty much history. And again, I loved it. Yeah, a Super Nintendo Fire Emblem game just made me squeeze. So yeah, and that's how I came to. And that, kids, is how I met Thracia.
See, this is the difference between Grant's skill level and mine, because Grant can, play a game in a language he doesn't understand and be like, oh, this on the command menu is attack, and this is probably weight. Whereas I, playing in English, still mistakenly hit the weight command because it filters to the top of the window, even though it's right there in the face, and I can read. I don't have that excuse. So I guess I'll go next.
Yeah, go on.
I don't have nearly as interesting a story as Grant does coming to this. It's kind of... I guess my story is a little bit like Guy's in that I started playing Fire Emblem with the most recent entry at the time that I got into the series, which, unlike you, Greenhorns, was a decade ago. So let's see, that would have been Blazing Sword, which back in my day was just called Fire Emblem.
Mm.
So
the first one says the American.
The American, indeed, the first Fire Emblem.
In America.
In America.
In America.
It's actually a very appropriate podcast to be making that remark on.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
So that's where I got my feet wet, and I fell in love with it like immediately. I loved the game to death. So I figured, I went on a little Fire Emblem binge thereafter. I think Sacred Stones came out shortly thereafter, so I played that one real fast. I played... I went back a little bit in time, found an English translation of the Sealed Sword. All of these have gone through so many name changes in the 10 years I've been playing. So forgive me if my naming's a bit off. But
Yeah, it's fine.
played Roy's game next, and liked everything I was seeing. I kind of went forward in time from there. Played the Tellius ones. Played, I guess, the 3DS ones before I started going back in time and brushing up my Japanese Fire Emblem repertoire. So very recently, I would say within the past year or so, I hanging out in Fire Emblem land with you folks, one tends to pick up a bit of Fire Emblem knowledge by osmosis. So I kind of understood pretty quickly that Thracia was like the best Fire Emblem I had never played up to that point. I had played Holy War. I enjoyed that one, so I figured it was high time, at the recommendation of my good friend Guy McAulay, to take up Thracia as well. And so I had him kind of point me to a translation that I could actually understand. It's awesome. I finished that one, I guess,
There's a lot of
a
static
few months
going
ago.
on. I think Great is great. I think you're having static again. It's
Oh, me?
yeah, great.
Yeah, it says you're talking, so
That's weird. I didn't say anything.
that's
Yeah,
why I'm saying it. I
I
think
think
the
you're
static's
still
coming.
on
Okay, well, it
thing.
died down. John, continue. Sorry.
Okay, here, go on, John.
think-
My
I think I
apologies.
understand.
I was not trying to do anything.
No,
It's all
you
good.
know it's not your fault. Go, it's fine.
It's all good. Yeah, I think that's pretty much how I came to Thracia. I enjoyed it a ton. I enjoyed both of the Super Nintendo games a ton. So I'm glad to be here talking about it.
Well, there's one you haven't played, but we'll talk about that one at a later
yes.
date.
And
Both
you're
of the
gonna
other
enjoy that
options.
one too.
I think you'll love that one personally, especially
That one's Arcanea, so I'm going to love it.
yeah.
I
Those
don't.
are great length of
um,
time.
I did not
Grant,
play
we,
that
we
one
should
either,
talk
so-
about mystery at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe
But
I
for
should.
now,
Maybe I should
It's
see
all
it
a
for the first
mystery
time
to
for
me.
that.
Zing.
And with that, Holy.
well,
Oh, I guess it's my
Alright.
turn now. Okay.
Alright.
How did I discover Thracia now? Well, first off, I discovered Fire Emblem simply because basically I was just a Virtual Console addict. About 2 to 3 years ago, I basically just bought any kind of old games, be it on the NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, shit like that. And many people told me on Memeverse that that's stupid, a social network where kids just hang out with their Wii and 3DS and just post whatever shitty content they want to. And then they said, a lot of them said that Fire Emblem was a really good game, the original one, Blazing Sword. So one night I just looked up a gameplay video of it and,
original one.
hey, what?
What?
Ah, sorry, never mind. Anyways, I just looked up some gameplay of Blazing Sword and that was pretty interesting. So I just decided to buy it the next day and ended up being my very first Fire Emblem game. Even though Awakening came out a few months ago at that time. I don't know. Anyways, I ended up really liking the game even though my first one actually failed. I think I failed at chapter 25 because I really overused Marcus to death and all my other units were shit, so that's why I still don't use Marcus, by the way. Anyways, so after that I liked the game but never finished it at that point. So after that I bought Awakening because I like Blazing Sword. I ended up really liking Awakening at that time, and believe it or not, I still do like this game even though it's pretty flawed. And after that I think I went to Sacred Stones. Then I played Sacred Stone after that, and then I just decided at school to try some of the old Fire Emblem games because I discovered that there were Fire Emblem games on the NES, Super Nintendo. I just wasn't aware that this was a thing, so I just looked them up online and played them on one of these shitty online browsers that allows you to play games, Super Nintendo games online or some shit like that. And I ended up slowly trying like for a few minutes Holy War and Thracia without really knowing them, and ended up liking them, but not much more than that. And after all that time, well, that's when I pretty much about some months later I finally joined the basically the whole online world actually, where I started hanging out with Facebook groups on Seren's Forest, on Discord eventually. So um, at that time, I basically get to know much more the whole game of Fire Emblem. That's how I discovered the older game. That's how I discovered my favorite game of all time, the genealogy of the Holy War. And then I think, and after that, sorry if I'm getting a bit carried away there. And that's how I pretty much met Guy, which is honestly one of my best online friends. Love you. Anyways,
Oh,
that was a bit wholesome. Sorry. So I pretty much met you and quickly learned that while you hated Rated Dawn, you love it, Thracia 776. And then that's how I really discovered it is when you made me play. You heavily recommended me to play it. I think I made it to chapter 9 or something, and then just stopped for some reason. I don't even know why. I just did. I couldn't even explain it. Anyways, but then I just a few months passed, um, and then you guys just suggest me to um, wait. I'm trying to collect my thoughts now. Okay, so after that, I just learned of the podcast that Ronaldo was doing about echoes and favorite females and main characters, and then I think you and Gwen and Guy suggest me to it that if I wanted to participate in this podcast, I would play Thracia 776 before, well, today, and that's what I did. I played Thracia for the first time in about a few weeks, and that's basically how I discovered this game and Thracia, and wow, that took way too much time. Sorry, guys, I really got way too carried away.
nope, that's fine. That's what this was for.
I'm just very impressed that like out of the 4 people on this podcast, 50% of them were introduced to this game pretty much because of Guy.
Well done, Guy. Well done.
GG. Well, yeah, I yeah.
Guy will
that
spread
was-
Guy will spread the message of our Lord and Savior Thracia.
like,
One
also-
of us. One of us.
one of us. Yeah.
But like the thing is, like
Phew.
we really liked it too. I mean, like there must be some sort of common.
It's almost as if it's a
Genes
good
about-
game.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And speaking of good games, the next item on our list was to talk about the different mechanics on that list. And if I'm not mistaken, we all agreed to one mechanic a person. We were all, or at least 2 for John. We were all going to talk about one in particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was
Yep.
the plan.
All
Yeah.
right.
So, John, you're up first.
I am up first. So the mechanic I had chosen was so I picked one mechanic that I like a lot about the game, and I picked one mechanic that I'm a little more lukewarm on. So let's start on a positive note. Let's do the good one first. So I really like Crusader scrolls. They're really cool. So about the 3rd chapter of the game, you save a kid, bring him back to his like parents' house or something like that, and you're rewarded with, I think even one of the characters calls it a ratty piece of paper. And that is your brilliant introduction to the Crusader scrolls. And what it does is it changes your character's growth rates. Well, it's kind of 2 main things, right? Every scroll has a unique way in which they change its bearer's growth rates, and also it prevents critical hits outside of the Ridiculous Wrath ability. And since Thracia, they've taken a similar tack with some items, but it's never quite shown up to this extent. Like there are things that, adjust your growth rates across the board by 5% or so, but there's never really been another Crusader scroll where it's this like interchangeable item where you can put it on anybody and you get, 10s and 15% in this category and negatives to another one. And it's never quite as far reaching as it is in Thracia.
Well, to be
So,
fair, Mystery
I've
of the
got-
Emblem also did that with the.
Well, yeah,
Orb
I
set.
was gonna say, since John hasn't played Mystery of the Emblem, that game introduced the concept with the shards of the Star Sphere.
Aha. Well, see, this
Um,
is why someone needs to fill in the mystery besides me. But for the part that isn't mysterious, I think there's an effective part of this, and there's a less effective part of this. So the most effective part of this for me is its interaction with this is going to be a theme that I'm sure is going to come up for the rest of us, is that every single mechanic that's introduced in Thracia it's codependent on everything else. Like there are so many different parts of this system that rely on other parts of the system to really have their fullest effect.
It's true.
That
It's true.
like it's tough to take one out of the context of all the rest. So the reason I say this is because I was about to say Crusader Scrolls are really good at letting every character in the cast have at least the chance to approach capping all of their stats, but that's only possible because there's a universal stat cap of 20 on everything for everybody, which again, unless my Fire Emblem education is incomplete here, has not been the case since the very first of the Fire Emblems.
It was also like that in Mystery of the Emblem.
And Gaiden had universal caps as well.
Yeah, but they were 40, not 20.
Yeah,
I know, but they're still universal though.
Yeah, Guidance was still universal.
So the low that kind of low universal stat cap is an important thing for the Crusader Scrolls, I think, because it allows you over the course of 25 plus a handful of chapters to be able to exchange the Crusader Scrolls to the right people so that they have the right opportunities to really achieve everything you want them to, which is really cool because it means that naturally the characters can have fair to midland growth rates.
Or in some cases, OP growths. Like if you give Asvel the Seti scroll, he has 100% speed growth.
Sure,
you can
and
make
there are some
beautiful.
people that have really incredible growth rates. Otherwise,
Or
I'm just
you can make
impressed by the
Bardic
number
Grants
of
manageable or something because
I'm impressed by the number of Thracia characters that are, modest, but because of Crusader Scrolls have like a bunch of potential, do a lot of really interesting stuff. Which also goes into the fact that you have to have a big cast, but that's another feature that it's related to that I think we'll be discussing later. The less effective part of Crusader Scrolls is it's a criticism I could give like any Fire Emblem ever, which is that it's not totally explained. You just get, again, a ratty piece of paper. It does something to your growth rates. All of them do a different thing to your growth rates. You never really get to figure out which. Obviously, at the time there were strategy guides. Now there's the internet. A little bit of cheating could get you exactly where you need to be. But if you were just going from the content...
Yes.
Yeah.
John.
John.
Oh no.
Oh my God! No. This is bad.
John's going my route. Crap. Where's the...
Oh my God! Are you
We
kidding
need to
me?
repair the Valkyrie staff.
I thought it would be fine.
That kind
no.
of money.
No. God damn it.
John.
John Barkmenyer Akite.
John.
He has left, it seems. Oh no, what?
Oh crap! Come on. Get back on.
Oh shit, that's...
Anyway.
That's...
I guess I'll kind of interject something related to what John was talking about.
Sure, go on.
I guess defense of the Crusader Scrolls is you can kind of infer sort of what they do based on the Crusaders' name they bear. Like if you played Holy War, you'll know what their weapons, what stat boost the weapons gave, so you can kind of infer they might tie into that.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's true.
Which you couldn't really do that with Mystery of the Emblem Star Shards because, like, what does Taurus do? Like, what does Sagittarius do? But
You'd be
of course, I agree. It's not explicit, maybe as much as it should be, but just
oh god, Grant,
something
you're
to fill
static
space.
again. Okay,
Me? What?
It's gone.
I didn't
Gone.
even-
It's gone.
Okay, good.
It's gone. j- the okay then.
Go on.
I'm just kind of like, what do we do?
Well, yeah, I think
Let's just keep going. Let's keep going. I'm gonna try and add John back.
Well, next on the list is you, Grant.
All right. So my topic was fatigue and minimum character limits. So one unique mechanic to Thracia 776 is the idea that if a character attacks, if they dances or heals or just do anything, they accrue fatigue. And if their fatigue on the fatigue meter is greater than or equal to their max HP, they have to sit out the next chapter.
Actually, I think if the fatigue number is equal to the max HP, you can still participate in the next map. But whatever. Go on.
That sounds right, but go on.
So, a reason why fatigue, in my opinion, is one of the better mechanics, one of the best, is that it's one of the only times where Fire Emblem actively tries to create a mechanic to discourage low manning. Most Fire Emblem games can be pretty much beaten by just a relative handful of super juggernauts, and they don't really try to do anything to discourage this. Thracia, at the very least, has fatigue. It actually tries to get the player to swap out different units and rotate them. And in my opinion, this has a really positive effect on the gameplay because now you're required to train multiple units, not just a super team. And it goes back to the fact that, with Crusader Scrolls, you can make a lot of characters good across the board. Going to back what John was saying about every mechanic being interdependent. And then, last but not least, there's the character limits. Having minimum character limits on this is also a really great idea because, again, it makes escape chapters in particular more difficult because you can't just have two powerful units flying a straight line and escape. You have to actually get them all through. And I think that actually, that makes a profound positive difference because now you have to think about how to get everyone through and not just one or two.
Yeah,
people.
It certainly makes a skip chapters a lot more tense and otherwise, for example, the whole monster escape part will be a joke if you actually there's no battle preparations in the master arc. Never mind. I said nothing, but like chapter 19 will be a complete joke if you could bring this Lee, for example.
Yeah, see, I was gonna mention chapter 19 because the way that your units are distributed in that map, it kind of dares you to leave people behind because like Leaf is right by the exit.
Yeah, he is.
So it's like go right ahead. If you want to just bail right now, you can, but
you do want to save Margarita though, right? Right? That's pretty much what the message is.
And then that chapter gives you like what, 2 different possible characters to recruit, and you can only recruit one of them.
Mm-hmm. Depending on which route you went.
Yeah, about that, I might as well at this point here. I think what I was gonna say, I think the character balance between the both routes is kind of iffy if you ask me. Like, there's basically almost no reason to take the B route, or almost no reason. Like, at the A route, you get arrows, which, depending on your playstyle, is possibly a better old one. And you can also get the best stuff out of the game, Sleuth, because it comes with aiming staves, and also the minimum skill to make it so that staves could never miss. And yeah, basically the units in this routes are really, really strong. Where in the B route, they're not that great. Like wait, what was I gonna say? Yeah, and B route you basically have a weak one, which is Miranda. I've heard that she's not that great because well, her stats aren't that good. She starts at a low level. One is pretty much stronger solely because of personal development. Blah 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 blah. And yeah, yeah, B route does have another Pooji at least. That's cool, I guess. But
A route's better designed though.
oh yeah, that
Yeah, I find A route is better designed. B route, I mean, I won't say there's no reason to take it because it does offer some things, but for the most part, you get better stuff on A route.
yeah, you do. Like Sleuth alone makes A route much more worth it, I'd say, because
Somebody coming right off the bat with A rank staves, yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
not just pretty good, he's pretty awesome, I'd say. Like
Plus, you also get you can get Ilios if you want him, but I personally prefer Olwen. You can get Misha, you can
oh
get
yeah, Misha too, I
Amalda.
forgot about her. Yeah.
John's back.
Is he? I
Alright.
didn't see him.
Let me
Uh,
add him to the call.
He's in the Facebook chat. Never mind. No, you do not get a second Poogie on the A route.
No, not
That's
the A
only
route,
B
the B
route.
route.
Yeah, no, somebody in chat, Christian,
Oh, okay, I did not see that.
said, no, you do not get an extra Poogie in the A route.
Okay, now
You
I see it.
get
Yeah,
you get an extra warp staff, I believe an extra rescue staff. You get the soul manual. I believe you can also get the nihil manual. I want to say.
yeah. You can steal the Neil manual from cut.
Yes.
This guy.
Now,
the
well,
guy with the
one thing
mustache.
that's interesting about Connemar and Amalda's
Connemar,
appearances
thank you,
on the routes, on their opposite routes, is the fact that if you want to, you can kill them in 16A for Connemar and 17B for Amalda, so you don't have to deal with them in Chapter 19.
Well, actually, I did a bit of a mistake. Well, mistake. I actually captured Connemar instead of killing him, so I still have to deal with him on chapter 19. But
Rip.
I guess his stuff was worth it. But you know, bleh. I was dumb.
So, all right. Moving on, unless you guys have more to say about fatigue or minimum character limits.
Well, see, what I think you covered it pretty well, but I do love the minimum deploy count because I wish they'd bring it back because it helps alongside fatigue discourage low manning. Like a specific example of where it would have benefited is the Eternal Stairway in Conquest.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That map would have benefited a lot from just not even fatigue, just simply a minimum deploy count. You know, you have to bring
Oh,
say
God.
6 people as a baseline, so you can't just skip it in 3 turns with Corden and Camilla. You have
Can
to
I just say
bring
one
other
thing?
people. Sure.
Yeah.
Fuck this map. Fuck this map and fuck this map. It's so bad.
The
Oh my
Eternal Stairway.
God. The Eternal Stairway. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
good.
This,
Oh, good.
this-
I was like,
Ah.
what map in FE5 can have you going like that?
24x.
16B.
16 being, well, I don't think 16B is that bad. I personally don't think 24X is that bad if you've been preparing yourself. It can be hell if you aren't prepared for it, but
14X is bad only if you don't have any staves to silence/sleep the dark mages. Otherwise, you'll be fine. I think.
I mean, 14X I don't think is bad at all.
24X. 24X.
Oh. 4X. See, my argument with 24X is the warp tiles don't really bother me because you want somebody to go into that room anyway to deal with the reinforcements so they don't come after you.
Thing is, though, how are you supposed to get out, though?
Rescue staves, rewarp staves, warp staves, like, yeah, they're all staves, but the thing is, if you've been paying attention and you've been stocking up the way the game wants you to, nothing that chapter throws at you is really an issue.
My big issue is that the warp tiles are not hinted at. There's no way to tell, hey, this is a warp tile. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I kind of wish
I wish they could at least make it a little different color, like a shade of green or yellow or
Well,
something.
See, my problem with that then is that removes the point of the trap existing in the first place. Like, both of the Alib games have those fire traps where you can see them, and so you're not going to put a unit on them.
Yeah,
like, they don't always trigger,
point,
but...
Actually. That's a good point.
So, I mean, I guess you could argue that it's a scummy trick that shouldn't exist in the first place, but saying it does, if they made it clear what tiles were warp tiles, there would be no point in having them be warp tiles. You just avoid them.
Well, in that case, I guess just don't have them to begin with and try and find a different way to challenge the player.
Yeah. See, I could get along with that. I'm not saying, like, I love the warp tiles, but I don't hate them as much as people seem to.
Right, yeah.
Mostly because, like, they don't 16B doesn't totally screw you over with them. It's annoying, but the point of
from what I've
16B
heard, it's annoying as all hell. Yeah.
Well, see, the point of 16B is that you're overcoming the terrain itself. You're going through the dark forest, so it's supposed to be that's supposed to be frustrating to deal with. You're supposed to feel what the characters are feeling there. 24X comes late enough in the game to where I feel like if you've gotten this far and you've paid enough attention to have the supplies the game expects you to have, it's a non-issue.
Yeah,
it's a minor inconvenience at best.
To put it in other words, I think the quote-unquote bullshit in this chapter is justified because you're this late in the game. You might as well expect all the
yeah. See, like, this might sound kind of asshole-ish of me, but if you get that far in Thracia and you still somehow have not learned what it's trying to teach you, you kind of deserve to get stuck.
Nice.
Because of a valid point, to be sure.
Because especially, like, we're going to get into this later on, but the way that the game is so well designed and it guides your hand without, like, explicitly giving you pop-ups and stuff saying, hey, do this or you should try this. If you really get that far and you still don't know, like, what the game wants you to know, I mean, that's nothing short of a miracle, to be honest. Like, I don't know how somebody could really get that far in the game and still not understand it.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like, yeah, I have nothing to add, really. You pretty much nailed it.
I mean, there definitely are better ways that, you know, you can come up with something, I'll use the word cheap, to mess with players, to keep them on their toes. But for what it is, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people seem to think it is.
I think that covers that segment, I believe.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm not even
we're talking about the minimum character limits and deployment.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
So I brought up the Eternal Stairway as an example of another chapter in another game that could have benefited from having a minimum deployment count.
Or just even having the Thracia escape requirements. Like, okay, you know, you want...
Well, everybody does have to escape in that map. Everybody you deploy.
That's right, yeah. Never mind.
The problem is you can deploy just 1 or 2 units and get it through it in like 3 turns with little to no risk.
Yeah.
I actually...
Another map that would have benefited from the Thracia style escape and minimum deploy counts is Birthright Chapter 12, the only escape chapter on that route.
Oh yeah,
it's arguably the worst designed escape chapter because all you have to do is just pair up Corrin and just like fly over to the escape.
You can pretty much beat it in 2 turns, and that's done.
Yeah. I don't even think it's arguable that that's the worst escape map because like there's no risk to you, and unlike the Conquest one where technically everybody you deploy has to get out on that one, only Corrin has to be out on this one. So even if you do fill up your deploy slots in that one, you still only have to get Corrin out. I mean, Plus, that chapter just sticks out weird to me because the point of Birthright was to have, be mostly rout the enemy and defeat the boss to be consistent with Awakening.
Yeah.
Because it was supposed to appeal to the more casual audience and people that liked Awakening. So to just throw in a random escape map and then, frankly, not even make it worth having in there kind of doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, it's
Like that'd be like if Gaiden just randomly had like a survive map or something.
yeah, like Guardian having a defense map all of a sudden, that'd be pretty dumb.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. Like it's not consistent and it's not well designed enough and doesn't add enough to the game to justify it being different.
Oh, I think John's on Skype.
Yes.
Let me add him to the call.
Hooray.
Hold on. Still adding. Still adding.
Let's see if we can get him in. That'd be nice.
John?
Hey.
Oh shit! He's back from the dead, I guess.
I was just happy I had an arm staff on me.
Yeah, but
Oh,
what happened?
I get brought back by the Valkyrie, you get brought back by Alm. Whatever works, man. Anyway, so we were talking about fatigue and minimum character limits. So,
Excellent.
do you have any thoughts on that since you just recently came back?
I have so many thoughts, Grant. It's tough for me to say anything without probably stepping on what's been said already. I think it's a great system. I really enjoy that. I'm sure this has been said. I really enjoy the fact that it prevents you from, being able to solo everything. That's clearly the number one intention that the designers had putting it in there. But kind of hand in hand with that, I really like how it makes it kind of democratizes the experience among the whole team and makes you pick not just your favorites, but it starts to feel like a real army when you are forced to use a whole bunch of different people and make sure that any one of them can carry a role in a given battle. That's what I really like about it.
And I think this whole point is enhanced by the fact that most people, if not all units, have some sort of use they can bring to the table. Like for example, just for example, you have both archers like Tanya and you have Ronan. Like Tanya is pretty much a typical female archer. She has kind of low strength but great skill, great speed, and pretty much Rebecca before Rebecca was cool. But on the other side, you have Ronan.
Implying Rebecca was ever cool. What?
God damn it! On the other side. On the other side, you have Ronan. Ronan, which is a pretty strange unit to say the least. He has low strength too, and has worse stats in pretty much everything from what I remember. But he has a 55% magic growth. See, you could say that Ronan is really useless, but the point is, he can be a very effective magic tank. He can be a very effective mage killer, and that is what makes him still pretty useful, despite Tanya being seemingly better than him in every way. See, I think the whole fatigue and minimal deployment really works, really enhance the feeling that you can pretty much use as many people as you want because they all have their little niche they can bring to the table, and that makes pretty much everyone useful in their own special way. Well, except me for Turd. He's pretty bad. Turd is a joke.
Well, I only think that's true because there are just it's an artifact of there being so many other choices for Myrmidon in this game, right? I mean, there are a ton of other really good Myrmidons, but if it weren't for the fact of that, it would be just like all the others. Like he would have unique points about him that make him a decent choice in some respects, depending on what your team looks like. I mean, that's the entire thing that fatigue does, is it makes you appreciate the differences between different people and really take them into consideration when you're staffing roles in the army, which is not necessarily something you have to do for other Fire Emblems.
One of the things that I really like about that, in the same vein, is, well, to go along with people in the same class not being invalidated. For example, Dean and Edda. Looking at their bases,
sorry.
Dean is unquestionably better than Edda. Without fatigue existing, there would be little to no reason to use her unless you really, really like her. But because fatigue exists, and Dean can get fatigued, if you want another Dragon Rider, well, train up his sister.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. And besides, one advantage that Edda can have with Dean is that thanks to Crucible Scrolls existing, well, you can always bring a bunch of scrolls to Edda and pretty much grind her with those scrolls, and she should be much better stat-wise than Dean thanks to those scrolls, and that could rework. That could make her even more of a valid choice compared to Dean, if you're into this. Like, do you see point I'm making there? Like, does what I say make sense? Or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just didn't want to sound like a deadbeat or something. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, like, I think we pretty much covered everything here. Like, again, like we said earlier, every mechanics in Thracia pretty much depends on every other mechanics that is present to pretty much form a very solid whole that just works perfectly all together. Like, yeah. I think you made a really good point earlier, John, about this, like how every mechanic works. And just link it to another, yeah. Whew.
So if you don't mind, let's, I think next is dismounting with Guy.
Yes. I wanted to talk about dismount. Now, Thracia didn't introduce dismounting. That was introduced in Mystery of the Emblem as well.
I knew that one.
Thracia carried over a lot of things from Mystery of the Emblem, I think, for the better. But for those who have not played either of those games or Tear Ring Saga, the basics of dismounting is that mounted units will use either lances or axes, and a couple of them will use swords while on their horse. But when they go indoors, they have to get off of their horse because logic. And they trade out their lance or their axe for a sword. If they already use swords, they keep their swords. If they already use bows, they keep their bows. If they use magic, they keep their magic. So the purpose of that is in virtually every other Fire Emblem game, cavalry and flying units universally outclass infantry and archers.
Well, almost universally, but
movement is key in a strategy RPG. The more movement you have, the more ground you can cover in a single turn, the more experience you gain, which means the more your stats go up, the more those stats matter to begin with. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah, snowball.
So dismounting kind of negates that, and it works in tandem with fatigue by saying not only are your mounted units weakened for a good half of the maps, you're not necessarily going to be using those same mounted units on every map to begin with. So it's one added layer of balance, and I think it really benefits the game because these stat penalties mean you can't just, well, I already said it, you can't just steamroll with a couple of horseback units, where if we look at the game's predecessor, if we look at Holy War, Sigurd can pretty easily solo his half of the game.
I did it once. It was almost easier than doing the game normally. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. See,
Sigurd is broken, guys. He really is.
He is. There's...
Like, his only low point is in Chapter 4, where mages start to show up. But then, you thought it's not for the rest of the game because of the lost resistance, but then in Chapter 5, he gets Tearfang.
Yes.
Yeah, he has no more flaws for the rest of the generation. GG Theology. GG.
Plus, there's the fact that Holy War introduced Canto, which let mounted units use up their remaining movement after they made an action. Now, Thracia still has that, but obviously it doesn't work when they're dismounted.
Yeah, that makes sense because
And
they're on
then,
foot.
you look later on in the Tellius games, Kanto is even stronger than it was in Holy War. And because the maps aren't as big as they are in Holy War, the mounts cover even a wider swath of every map in those games. Case in point, Har is super strong in Radiant Dawn.
That's an understatement.
So, Thracia actively tried to get around that problem. They saw what went wrong with it in Holy War, and they brought the dismounting mechanic back from Mystery for Thracia.
I think it's particularly good that you've mentioned Holy War as much as you did, because it's really interesting to me. Thracia, unlike I'd say numerous, well, at least any of the other Fire Emblems of Mr. Kaga's time, I think it unusually pays a lot of attention to like some of the weaknesses of the prior title. Not,
Yes.
We all like Holy War on this podcast too, but I think he's, at least in the Kaga games, I never got the sense that he paid much attention to like the leading criticisms about his work up until Thracia, where I think he is responding to at least some of the things that were a little bit more awkward about Holy War. And particularly dismounting shows a lot of that, because one of the biggest complaints, and I say biggest for a reason, because Fire Emblem 4 is huge, and like part of what that did was it made horses really, really important to, like, normally, as you said, there may be some advantage to be mounted over infantry. In Holy War, that advantage was, multiplied several fold, just because the distances everybody had crossed were so much bigger. So I think dismounting, or at least the way they implemented in Thracia, is an interesting way in which he paid attention to, things that needed to be worked on in the past.
I think just to add a little point about Holy War's unit balance, just for a few moments, I think, to be fair, what Holy War did for the most part is to at least make foot units mostly much stronger in combat than money units, so they could at least have a little niche going on, even though their movement really, really sucked. At least they had that going for it, and I think that makes them not as useless as the other ones.
That's something I say a lot when discussion of Holy War comes up, and a good example of that would be Ira. She has really good bases. She has crazy skills. So there is incentive to use foot units in Holy War. It's not that they're totally useless, but looking at the contrast between the unit balance in Holy War and the unit balance in Thracia, I think we can all agree Thracia kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit better.
Well,
Thracia hit the nail on the head over every Fire Emblem game.
Yes, I
pretty much true.
You can tell Thracia makes one of its top priorities to be as balanced as possible. It has a number of weird ways of achieving that, but they all come out to its definite goal is to try to achieve nearly perfect unit balance across everybody.
And with the mechanic tie-ins, I think it's interesting that Thracia all at once encourages you to use whoever you like, because everybody's got a use and everybody caps out at the same point. But at the same time, fatigue exists saying, use whoever you want, but don't overuse them. That's one of the things that I've always, or ever since I gave it a proper look, appreciated about Thracia.
Yeah, that's
like to go along with what Ollie mentioned a little bit ago, like Tanya versus Ronan. Ronan has the advantage of having super high magic, which functions as resistance in this game, and having an extra point of movement over her.
Oh yeah,
so he participates in rescue chains. He can simply reach a couple of enemies slightly faster than her. Another commonly cited useless unit is Shanem. He comes with the bargain skill. So even though you have capturing, if by chance you do need to buy something, he makes it easier on you.
For example, Chapter 22's Night Crest, in case you need to promote someone that you did not promote earlier. Like, for example, in my case, I did not promote Carrion until Chapter 22 for some reason. That was dumb. But yeah, uh, that's a good point. Like I said, every unit has their advantage and their pros and cons, basically. So, yeah.
Something I'd like to add about dismounting is that, sorry, is that when the unit dismounts, they have to switch weapons, usually to a sword, and most flyers and mounted units don't use swords when they're mounted.
Yes.
And their sword ranks are usually lower, so in a sense, it also nerfs them because it actually forces them to use a lower weapon rank.
For the most part, yeah, although a couple of people do have higher weapon ranks in swords than their main unit, like Karen, for example, comes with a D rank in swords because she joins indoors.
Right.
Yeah, funny thing
But
is,
yeah, see, that's another thing I liked compared to the way Mystery the Emblem did it, because Mystery had the weapon level stat.
That could just randomly increase.
Yes, and it governed every weapon type that the unit could use, which, to be fair, in that game was a maximum of 2, one mounted, one dismounted. But the thing with that is, in Mystery, you could have a Cavalier or Paladin use, say, the Gradivus, and then just hop off their horse and use Mercurius, no problem. In Thracia, that doesn't happen. So you have to really plan things out and work in advance if you want to raise up their dismounted ranks as well as their mounted ranks.
sorry, I wasn't listening.
And I think it also really benefits. It adds some extra choices to be made when you get later in the game and you find people that come with A ranks in both, like Misha, for example.
Oh yeah, she joins with both A rank in swords and lances, which is really, really nice, by the way. Oh my god. Like, just being able to use a master sword at base is already great enough. Because
Absolutely, and I think that's another point of like character differentiation. That's another thing that sets different people apart from each other. Because other Fire Emblems tend to differentiate only between like raw numbers, but Thracia adds a whole bunch of other, statistics, characteristics, things that they tell you, things that they don't even tell you, that are unique to different characters that all go into the calculus of, is this person worth matching up against the people I've already trained, and that's one way that it keeps new recruitments later on in the game still interesting, because everyone has something to bring to the table that way.
Yeah. So to conclude my section of this part, that all of that tying in together and the balance it creates in this game is one of the big reasons that I love it so much. So with that, Ollie, you are up.
Oh shit, it's
Capturing and no cash flow.
capturing, no cash flow it is. So first off, I just want to talk first about capturing, because that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, but cash flow is fine too, I guess. Anyways, my capture is a mechanic that was first kind of scared of, because, well, scared. How could I say it? How could I?
Intimidated?
Maybe that's the right word. Like, I thought that this will really make the game much harder, because you have like this, because little me that was scared of complicated Fire Emblem games when I was still a noob, thought capture was scary because that is so much depth to the game, that is such a big mechanic to a Fire Emblem game where you could just buy weapons normally without any problem. But when I actually started to play FE5, I started to capture some people, and I actually became addicted to it, like a drug. Like, I remember in the early chapters, I just went batshit insane. I tried my best to capture everyone, because it was just so well made. Because see, here's how capture works for those who aren't aware of how it works. So basically, you can you can either attack an enemy normally or you can capture them. But when you capture people, first off, when you capture someone, you need to have an argue build that the opponent you are facing, and while you're after attempting to capture someone, your stats are actually off except for your HP and luck. So, and build too, I think. Anyways, well, and when you attempt to capture, your stats are off, like I said. But if you succeed to capture, you can basically have the units in your army well, basically you can carry the enemy with you. And when you have the enemy around, you can actually get this, trade the enemy's weapons into your inventory, and then release the enemy. I think you can guess how much cool shit you can do with that, because wow, it's great. Like you can just capture like short lances or javelins or whatever. But if you're good, you can actually capture like crazy shit like Toronto master weapons, stat boosters, soul manuals. Like, you can get all of this for free if you're skilled enough. It really encourages you to play differently, to really think about what your next move should be, and it adds so much into the game. And just even a side note, I think capturing is just addicting because I think even the sound effects are important. Like you can just when you release an enemy, I think the sound effect of the enemy walking away is really cool. I don't know, it just feels nice to hear the little foot sound that you hear. I don't know, I just liked it. It sounded really nice. I think all of this just make capturing that much addicting and just wow. I I I I'm in love.
Yeah,
I'm in love. I'm not no other way to put it. So
Well, it's a great mechanic.
it just
yeah.
is.
It kind of pretty much makes money irrelevant, and I like that because, as I mentioned once on my blog, I kind of don't like the way most Fire Emblems handle money. I feel like they give you too much, and so
Yes.
it kind of just eliminates the need for weapon durability, and it kind of feels like you just buy a billion stuff and that's
But
it.
money is important though.
I mean, with capturing, you're required to actually get stuff. You have to put in like work and effort, and I think that ends up making the experience all that much more satisfying since you have to continuously earn stuff. It can also act as a turtle disincentive in a way. In Chapter 17A, there's like a boss, Dark Mage, that has a warp staff. I remember during my stream, I managed to get Dean to capture it before he could even use it. So beautiful.
Wow, that's nice.
Nice.
So I agree with all of that. But one of the things I want to mention that I personally like about Capture is how the game uses that mechanic to tie the gameplay to the story.
Oh yeah, that's
Because
go on.
Leaf's army, well, first off, the mercenary group, the Fianna Freeblades, have little to no money to their name. And then when Leaf finds himself in charge of a liberation army, he needs a way to stock his soldiers with equipment. So it really gets across how desperate their situation is and how dire their funding is, how little funding they have, because you start with a flat zero.
Oh yeah, that's what's pretty shocking for me to start with.
Compared
nothing.
to, say, Shadow Dragon giving you, I believe, 10k right off the bat by visiting
First
that
village
first
you get
village.
gives you 10,000 gold, because that's totally fair and balanced, everyone.
Or in Path of Radiance, I believe it's when you get to Gallia, you get like 20,000, just because.
And at some point in the game, you'll get like 50,000 gold. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, but here, you not only don't have that kind of money, you kind of don't need it, but you have to, like Grant said, you have to work for the equipment you want. But another thing I like about that is that as a result of this, very few items in the game are actually unobtainable. Like you can even, albeit it's not with capturing, it's with stealing, you can get your hands on the Loptier blade that belongs to Raedric.
Yeah, but Actually, it's not that hard to do, but it requires
It's
some
it's
really good
not,
thinking.
but see the between the way capturing works and the way stealing works, what I'm saying is if you want it, chances are there's a way you can get it. You just have to be creative enough to get it. And that's something that I really like because I think it's the best single example of the way that this game pushes you to think outside of the box and not just, approach it the way you would any other Fire Emblem, any other strategy game.
Which is just charge and hope you don't get screwed by the RNG.
Mm-hmm. So
For sure, it adds interesting strategic considerations in the long term, and it adds interesting tactical considerations when you're actually in that map trying to work out how on earth you're going to get that one guy without exposing your soldier to a whole turn of half stats. Yeah, definitely. There's also another interesting way in which it kind of echoes the more thematic, like, edge of the game, I guess. You were saying that, it helps you realize that Leaf is part of this, band of really poor rebels just trying to make it through their situation. It also is a uniquely peaceful way to resolve conflicts on the battlefield. It results in, the enemy unit not losing their life.
mhm.
And I think that is
Yeah, I
another
forgot to
neat
mention that.
I think that's another neat reflection of kind of what Leaf brings to the table. In that, I'm sure we're going to talk about this later when we get to the story, but
Mhm.
I see the entirety of Thracia as being about the struggle between idealism and the harsh world of practicality. And Leaf's is, for better or for worse, just reliably on the side of his ideals from the beginning to the very end. And I think the capacity to save the enemy's lives while winning the war certainly reflects on the kind of person Leaf is, even in this world where, all this other horrible stuff is happening. That's all he's up against. He is still good enough of a man to just take their stuff and let him walk away. And that's another thing I really like too, that Oli mentioned he liked hearing, the footsteps of the people as they walk away, right? I really like how most of the enemy commanders also have like a little thing to say if you capture them but save their
The
lives.
funny thing is, one of the commanders if you release one of the commanders, it will just say, "I have nothing to add" or something like that. It will just walk away and that's it. I actually kind of chuckle at that because I find it pretty funny. So yeah, it's really cool that most people, if not all of them, have a different death code and release code. I think that's a nice touch on Thracia's part there. It's really cool.
Definitely.
So I think that covers really the capturing part, but I think I did not really well. We kind of got into the no any fruit flow part, but like we said earlier, that's it. Pretty much really emphasized on how broke your army is and how you really need to rely on having to capture units in order to get your items and maybe even sell them for money because, well, yeah. And as a bonus to that fact, well, let's not forget that items in Thracia are actually extremely expensive. Holy shit, they are expensive. Like I remember, like first seeing the prices of some of those items. I think in normal Thunderdome cost 3,000 gold. That's huge. That's insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it really makes it really. I think an interesting point. I think an interesting idea about this prices of items. I think it could mean that the whole the whole the whole kingdom of Thracia, let's put it that way, is really in a situation of crisis. Like they have barely they have barely enough resources to get by. They have barely anything to live because of the harsh conditions they are putting with. And because of that, I think that's why they could sell items at such high prices because they really need to sell them that expensively to get a living. I think at least that's how I see it myself, but maybe I'm wrong somewhere. But I don't know. It just clicked to me like that, that way. So what do you think about this theory?
I agree.
Yep, same here.
Oh yeah, well, alright, that makes sense. Oh yeah, so I think that covers that point of the. I think it covers the whole capturing mechanic, but overall, I think capturing is the strongest part of the game, just for every reason we mentioned. It just works really. It just does.
Yes.
Totally
It's-
agree. When I think about Thracia, like unique Thracian mechanics, number one on the list is capturing for sure.
I was once scared by it, but now I absolutely have no adoration with this mechanic. It's just fantastic.
I'm still scared by it, but at least I enjoy it.
Okay, that was
Well,
all. Okay.
I think we've had our fill of fanboying on capturing. Let's move on. John wanted to bring up something that he is a little not so fanboy on about the game.
I am. So this is hopefully my technology will allow me to actually talk through the entirety of my topic this time. So I wanted to talk about staves in Thracia, and to kind of, I'm not totally negative on them. I am a little bit sour on their implementation towards the end of the game. So this is what I'm thinking. You get a lot of different staves in Thracia. This is in this facet. It's just like tons of other Fire Emblem games. You get your healing staves, you get your movement staves, you get your status staves. It is not like a bunch of other Fire Emblems in kind of two respects. So the healing staves can miss when you use them. And the other primary difference, oh, they do. Indeed, they do. And the other primary difference is that for the non-healing staves, there's kind of this general sense that they have no limits whatsoever. So the status staves have permanent effects. If you don't restore them, they're just there for the rest of the map. And the movement staves can put you pretty much anywhere you want to go. So playing through most of Thracia, I guess for, a good 20 chapters or so, I thought that was a really cool idea. I actually enjoyed all the parts of that. To kind of get the missing staves out of the way, that never was a huge deal for me. And there are a number of mechanics in the game that kind of minimize its effects after a few chapters. I think the first is that even though staves can miss, a lot of the healers have a chance to double heal, so they can miss with the first one, and then suddenly you'll find out that, you got a bad roll on that, but you get a good roll on the fact that they just try again in the very same turn and end up healing the same amount anyway.
Yep.
And for the second part, after a certain point in the game, I believe there's some stat that improves well enough for most of the healers that they never practically have to worry about that ever again.
Yeah, actually, the skill
Yes.
stats factors in. The skill stat matters for healers for once because they calculate staff hit rates, and when you basically reach 10 skill, your hit rates from staves will be 99, so you will never miss with them or almost.
There you
never.
go. A whopping 10 skill points. It's
Yes.
huge.
That's the magic number you need.
So the practical effect of that is that the missing healing staff is only around long enough for you to realize that even in healing you need a backup plan, and then it goes away once you've learned that lesson and lets you play the rest of the game, which is fine. I don't particularly care about that.
Also,
What I
true.
care. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just bring in one more point before you talk about the last few chapters of the game.
Sure.
I think the interesting thing about healing in general in Thracia is that vulneraries are actually useful in this game. I actually use them almost all the time for once. Because see, vulneraries actually act like vulneraries actually act like elixirs. They heal you to full HP every time you use them, and you still have 3 uses of them, so they are pretty badass overall. And unlike healing staves, vulneraries are actually wait. God damn it, I lost my words. But unlike healing staves, vulneraries will never fail. They will always bring you reliable healing, which means they are always available to you. But when you use vulneraries, you actually need to lose a turn where you could have attacked an enemy. You'll have, like, I don't know, done something else to compensate for that. So I think it brings, again, another interesting dilemma brought by Thracia. Do you choose to do you choose to heal a unit with someone else and maybe miss your heal so that the unit that you want to heal can attack another enemy instead, or you could reliably heal this enemy to full HP, but it will not be able to do anything else on that turn. It really makes you think about what you want to prioritize between those two possibilities. I think that's really nice.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was exactly what I was going to say, because John's not alone in his mixed feelings on it, to say the least. This is one of the more common criticisms of the game, and I was going to say, y'all kind of already covered it. One, the vulnerary thing. The vulneraries heal you to full and do not miss. So, and John, you mentioned specifically what I wanted to point out. The point of this system is to encourage you to form backup plans, which is one thing I enjoyed about this game more so than other Fire Emblems, because they don't generally encourage you to do that. And another facet to that is that this game introduced the rescue mechanic, where you can, if you have more build, then your ally unit, you can pick them up and get them out of danger, and then another unit can, take them and drop them off somewhere else. So the game really encourages you to, think on your feet. If something doesn't work out, think of another way to get your objective met.
Totally, and it's all a classic Thracian question of balance, right? Because all of those three ways to address, you have a unit in danger. What do you do? Do you, 1, try to heal them with a staff? Do you 2, tell them to apply a vulnerary? Do you 3, have someone on a horse come by, rescue them, and get out of there? Like, all of those have different pros and cons, and there's no right answer to it. All of them can be backup plans. You should have all of them ready to go, but at the end of the day, like, it's totally Thracian in that it's up to you how to best prepare for that kind of situation.
To be fair, I don't like the missing staves either. I don't really think they really add much. But to be fair, I feel like people overreact when they first come across one, and it's like, yeah, it's a valid criticism, but some people act as if that just automatically destroys the whole quality of the game, and it's like, no, screw you. But there was something I wanted to talk about, is that John brought up the idea that staves, status staves, will have their effects just permanently fix on the unit. In theory, this would be super broken, but the thing is that Thracia does give you restore staves. So that means no matter what the game throws at you, you can always solve it. By contrast, this is something I think Conquest also had some powerful status effects, but it never really gave you a valid or meaningful solution to it. There were restore staves, which pretty much meant that whatever was thrown at you, you kind of had to take it. By contrast, Thracia staves are stronger, but they do, in the end, they do give you a solution to it.
And another aspect of that is that if an enemy in Thracia has a powerful staff, that staff could potentially be yours.
Yeah. That is a pretty awesome way of thinking right there.
In Fates, this is not the case. You do get a hexing rod that has a grand total of 3 charges. You do get some of these strong staves that Fates has, but they are just given to you, and they are also extremely limited. Where in Thracia, you have the ability to repair your staves and weapons with, albeit in a limited capacity.
Right.
It still exists, and again, thanks to capturing and other cool things that this game does, an enemy with like say a berserk staff is not the end of the world for you, because you can potentially have that staff and turn it right back on them.
Precisely. So this feeds right into where I wanted to go, or I really wanted to go with this section. So I mentioned, there are two defining features of staves in this game.
Okay, but before you
missing.
continue,
Go ahead.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Berserking Reinhardt was the most fun thing I had to do in the whole game. Just saying.
Oh, berserking Ryan.
It was
Yeah!
fun. It was fun.
Magic
Oh
is
my goodness.
everything.
Magic is everything. Oh man. Okay, but go on, John. I don't want to be a dick. Go on.
Oh no, not at all. That was a moment we definitely needed to share. I can only imagine Berserk Reinhardt. Terrifying, but in a good way. So missing staves, I don't consider that's kind of a non-issue to me. I mean, it's almost a non-feature to me because it teaches you something and then kind of by the very design of the game it weeds itself out. And the other defining feature of staves, which is that they are, omnipotent and have no limits, I think we have discussed quite well, sort of in a vacuum. Standing on their own, both of these features are pretty innocent to me, and I enjoy them. And and for like 20 chapters of the game, I really didn't have an issue with the fact that staves were super powerful, could be restored, but otherwise you had to live with their effects for an entire chapter. That made perfect sense. I think what disappointed me more in staves was the trend that the end of the game begins to take. So starting in chapter, I'm going to say 21 or so, 22?
I'd say 21X personally.
21X, okay. That's a good, that's right around that kind of fifth act break, right at the beginning of the end. And it's straight on through, the end of the game. Every single chapter starts with this core of staff users. They're always like Lopteric dark mages who are huddled in a corner all together. They all have a bunch of different status staves. And from the very beginning, they're all going to start peppering you with people falling asleep and people going berserk and people getting silenced and unable to use magic. So here is my problem with chapter after chapter after chapter of that. There are kind of two ways you can approach any chapter like that. You either deal with all those staves or you suck up all those staves. And by suck up, I mean, you either let people fall asleep and just abandon them and keep walking, or restore stuff that happens to them.
Oh my god. You don't do the former. I don't recommend it.
You don't do the former because, the point Guy pointed out, you can just capture everything. Because pretty much as soon as you deal with someone who has, nothing but a whole bunch of fancy staves, they're a sitting duck. They don't have any way to defend themselves. All they have are a bunch of free staves walking around for anybody to walk up and capture. So the practical effect of this is that there's a whole bunch of staves, you use a whole bunch of staves on them, and then you catch them all right back again. There's a bunch of silence and berserk staves. Obviously, you can't suffer a single turn of anyone going berserk because it's disastrous. So you stop all that from happening. You can walk up to them, you can take everything, and then you're ready to do it in the next chapter. My difficulty, and this may be more of a chapter design question than a staff design question, is that by the end of the game, when you have chapter after chapter after chapter of exactly that situation going on, two things happen. The first is that there becomes this kind of ritual exchange of staff gobbledygook at the beginning of a chapter, which once you get out of its system, you can finally start playing the chapter for real. But the second part is that enough of the chapter is taken up by staff users where that is supposed to be the focus of what happens in this map. This is supposed to be the map where there's this room full of people with warp staves and berserk staves, and you're trying to stop them from capturing the kids. There's this room full of dark mages that have this, bunch of silent staves and bunch of sleep staves that are supposed to weaken you up for, this attack from Dragon Riders. They're like, that is the gimmick of the final chapters. And the difficulty is that once all of those staff users are silenced or put to sleep, then
their effects are stored,
or are dealt with in any way, that's most of the chapter, and the rest becomes trivial. So essentially what I'm saying is, for the end of the game, you have two options to approach every chapter. Either trivialize it and make it kind of so-so, or suffer at the hands of ridiculous staff abuse and get destroyed. I guess my problem
No.
with staves is that the developers wanted too much of a good thing there at the end. The rest of Thracia is so balanced, and at the end they just want to make it all about fancy staff use. And when it's all about fancy staff use, it kind of equates into just kind of blah. That's my problem with staves in a nutshell.
Well, I don't know if it's very related to what you said, but I just want to add that Thracia was pretty much the very first game in the entire franchise that actually used a lot of items for the first time. Like in other Fire Emblem games, except for maybe we've done that case, I never used vulnerabilities, and especially, I never really found the need to use silent staves. I never really found the need to use warp staves, even though they're useful as fuck, but that's not the point. I never really found a use to most staves because I thought that I could beat like the chapters just fine without any status staves, but in Thracia they are actually borderline necessary to beat the game. And for me, it felt nice to finally be able to use those saves and make them feel useful for once. But I think the part you bring here is pretty much a good point. I think maybe we'll have toned down the number of status saves in final chapters because there's a shit ton of them, and it can get pretty annoying to restart so many people at the same time due to all those dark mages and whatnot. I see what you mean. I really do.
I agree with you, John. I'm not the biggest fan of the fact that it basically becomes staff use or bust.
Staff Emblem, basically.
Yeah.
Staff Emblem, we warp 776.
To be clear, like, I don't have any other issue with Thracia that makes that I am so negative on. Like, this is, if I could change anything about Thracia, this is the feature I'd change. Like, the rest, really cool. It's a little bit jarring that the rest of the game is focused so much on, like, balance and stuff being equal, and then at the end they decided to make their gimmick just pouring everything in one direction.
I think one cool thing that you could do is to in the eventual Thracia remake, like that's gonna ever happen, sadly. In the eventual Thracia remake, what you could do is to tone down the number of staves in the normal difficulties, and maybe on the hard and unique mode, just make the number of staves about the same as in the original game to make it feel like hard mode or something. I think that could be quite interesting. I think. This good word, I feel. Anyways, what do you think about this guy?
I think that that's kind of more of a level design thing than a staff design thing, which, John, you said that might be the case. And the reason I think that's the case is not because the way that staves work in the game are intrinsically flawed. Not that the fact that in the late game, there's an enemy that can berserk me, there's an enemy that will warp others towards me, there's an enemy that can silence me. It's the fact that chapter 24 in particular is the one that sticks out to me for this, is they throw all of that at you at once. It's the way that they the level in specifically deals with it and forces you to deal with it, not just berserk exists in this game, sleep exists in this game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely
so
fair.
For me, I would say a positive change for the game would not necessarily be tone down how strong these staves are. I would say tone down how much they're used against you in the late game.
Agreed. The chapter that sticks out to me was chapter 22. When I first played that chapter, I got nightmares. It was ridiculous. And now, like I said, I still remember just how nightmarish it was because Sias and the boss are just spamming this all chapter long. That's why I pretty much always warp skip that chapter, because I just don't want to deal with that crap.
Yeah,
I went so slow through chapter 22. Oli, you'll be very proud of me. I decided to absorb the staves in that one and restore everything. That was a terrible choice, but I did it.
I felt bad for you.
If we're talking about chapter 22, for me, my first thought was to have Olwen go talk to her brother, which then triggered Sias to leave, which thus made the enemies a lot less threatening as a whole.
It pretty much removes 30% hit and 30 avoid from all enemies on the map. That's a big deal. Trust me.
So, and then I can just have her, deal with Cohen sitting on the throne, and then rescue her back, and then let Reinhardt's squad start marching, let them drop the bridge, and I can just, do whatever at that point. I can take my sweet time doing whatever else. Chapter 22, I think it's a great chapter. I don't think have nightmares over it.
I don't really have nightmares with it either, but that's because I warp skipped it in a way. Well, mostly warp skipped it. I still did some stuff with it, but not much.
Well, now, see, warp skipping it is a common criticism of it, but to me, it's another example of the game's designers almost daring you to do that. Because the way that it's set up over there on the far side of the river is, if for whatever reason you don't get Leaf to seize on the first turn, you basically might as well just go ahead and try it again and do it quote unquote legit, because everything over there is so threatening, especially Reinhardt himself. So to me, it's I think it's less of a problem and more so a challenge. An unspoken challenge from Kaga himself.
I can definitely see that. I think we seem to be trending towards map discussions thanks to my mechanic discussion.
Well
thanks to my map design discussion, horribly disguised as a mechanic discussion. So here's the last question before we dip into maps for y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Would Thracia be the same game if you removed any of the mechanics it brings to the table? Are there any you can pick apart from the rest, and why or why not?
Not at all, because the simple answer is something we've echoed throughout this whole discussion, is that everything in this game goes together. You can't really pull the mechanics apart from each other, because the Crusader Scrolls work because there's universal caps, and the universal caps work because there's fatigue and everybody gets rotated in and out, and dismounting works, and everything ties together in this game, probably more so than I would say in other Fire Emblem games do, and most games in general, I would dare say. So to pick any one thing out, it's like playing Jenga. If you pull one thing out, the whole rest of it's just going to come tumbling down, and I don't think it would be anywhere near as strong of a game as it is.
Jenga Emblem, you heard it here first.
Hashtag Jenga Emblem.
I actually really like that metaphor, though. That's a perfect way to conceive of it, because yes, everything is so interrelated. I don't think there's a strand you can pull that doesn't unravel the big Thracian sweater. I guess that's the metaphor I'm using. I prefer Jenga to yours. Go ahead.
That actually sounds like a fun Fire Emblem level. It's just you try and destroy certain parts of a building, and you try to figure out the one part that'll bring the whole tower crumbling down on enemies.
Interesting idea.
I'm totally gonna use that for my game. Haha, thanks. Dibs.
But yeah,
all right.
I think my opinion is also we shouldn't really remove anything from Thracia, except maybe the minimum and maximum hit rates of 1 and 99. That I could do without, maybe. But
now, see, I could do without that, but at the same time, that's never bothered me because it feeds into the backup plan thing this game is trying to force upon you.
Yes.
Nothing is guaranteed. Something can always go wrong. It's kind of Murphy's Law in effect.
which is kind of what happened with today's stream.
Yup.
Oh boy.
We should have learned from Thracia.
I am
This was my
99% sure we should have learned a lesson.
Oh boy, that was
So,
interesting.
if they pick one thing and one thing only to remove, that would be my pick because it's probably the least woven into everything else. But I think we are in agreement on this. So, while we're talking about level design, that's our next segment.
Can I jump?
Yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
One more
Yes.
thing in there. I think just to
Yes.
kind of footnote that discussion. So I think that may be also the reason why when Future Emblem. It's like Jenga Emblem, except with the future.
It sounds like it has
when-
robots in it.
The
I want robots in a fire.
future or something.
So before language disagree with me, what I was trying to say was when future Fire Emblems, when future Fire Emblems decided to kind of take a different tack from the one that Thracia did, where, Yggdrasil was going one way, and then we went to the Game Boy games, and they decided to take a different road with stuff. I think one of the things that you can see happened was because they decided to distance themselves from some of the Thracian mechanics, they ended up having to distance themselves from a whole big package of Thracian mechanics just because they all travel together in order to be, useful, in order to have some effect on the gameplay. So I think that's one of the reasons why when you look at Thracia, it looks like this thing that did a whole bunch of different ideas that were never taken again. Well, the reason you never see them again is because if you try to take any one of them away, the practical effect of a whole bunch of other ones also has to go.
It's
To be
interesting
fair,
you
they
say
did
that
bring-
because
they did keep rescue.
yeah, they did keep rescue. They did keep Binding Blade didn't have diverse objectives, but Blazing Blade brought those back.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about what you said there is that we have evidence, we have interviews and screenshots that suggest the follow-up to Thracia was actually going to be much more like it.
Oh yeah, I remember. Actually, funnily enough, I actually saw that. I saw a video about it today, like a few hours ago. I saw a video on it by a random guy, and I thought it was really, really interesting. Like how much it looked like Thracia. It looked like the art style looked like Thracia.
Yep,
The-
I've
the
seen
map
that video
design looked like
before.
Thracia. It's like to put it a bit harshly. Fire Emblem the Binding Blade will have been an interesting game, believe it or not. But
This is a tiny bit of a tangent, but I think it's worth mentioning since you brought it up. I think the reason they did that is because Mr. Kaga himself departed the company, and they wanted to kind of distance themselves from his philosophies, which is kind of
yeah,
interesting to
that's
me because of
something.
how much Binding Blade actually ended up taking from Mystery and from Thracia.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that he left just because of that.
Well,
one
of the things a lot of people don't seem to know, which is understandable because you have to dig for interviews with the guy to find it out, is one of the things that drove Kaga away back then and then later put the fan base in a big frenzy was the suggestion that there be a mode that removed permadeath.
Oh, casual mode.
Yes.
Ooh.
Mr. Kaga didn't like that idea because he had the mechanic in for an express purpose, and he felt that it would take away from what he wanted his games to be. Now, I personally don't have a problem with casual mode. I'm not saying that. Nobody jumped down my throat. But I think it's interesting. What I'm trying to get at here is I think it's interesting that Binding Blade specifically distanced itself so much from what made its predecessors great, but on the surface level kind of took some of the cooler, or what they thought were cooler things, like the rescue mechanic, or a couple of the maps in Binding Blade look straight out of Thracia, or
Yeah, especially
stuff like
chapter
that.
7. It looks a lot like chapter 6.
Chapter 7, and there's another one, it's on the Sakei route, that looks straight like the city of Tara, but that's a little bit of a tangent. So I'm ready to move on when y'all are.
I think
All
we can
right,
move on, actually.
Sure.
Moving on to maps. So
Maps.
we basically had a lengthy list of which ones are our favorite or which ones we should talk about. Seems to me like we should start with our favorites and then just try to work in some other ones. We might not have enough time for all of them, but we should at least get to most of them. So let's
That makes
see.
good sense. Let's go chronologically through our favorites.
Yes.
Kind of give some structure to the game that way. So, Ollie wanted to pick up at the very beginning with Chapter 1, The Warrior of Fianna.
The Warrior of Fianna. Just as a disclaimer, Chapter 1 is actually not my favorite chapter in the game, but since people actually took some, if not all, of my favorite chapters in the game, I kind of have no choice but to fall back on this one. But that doesn't mean that I really like this chapter as well. So, Chapter 1. I think the reason why I like it so much is because, for once, a Chapter 1 in Fire Emblem is not fucking boring. For example, you just look at the very first chapter in Linsmoke, Agoran Plains. There's just Lyn, a brigand, and a brigand boss, and you just move forward. Very interesting, guys. I am really excited to play your game. Oh my god, I'm so hyped. We're gonna fight one brigand with 1 unit. That's cool, right? No, it's not. It's shit. Anyways, but like, you just take this first chapter, and this philosophy of the first chapters in Fire Emblem being very simple appears in most games in the series. Like, it appears in, for example, it appears in the Sacred Stones where there's only every kind set and just a bunch of fighters as well. Also, well, there's more enemies in Radiant Dawn first chapter. There's not a lot of units you control, at least not at the start. And I could go on and on, but I think you get the point here, and especially Fates. Fates first chapter is a joke. Oh my god, you can't even move current, for fuck's sake. That's ridiculous. But anyways, you get the point. For most of the chapters of Fire Emblem are pretty shit because of that. However, the first chapter in Thracia 776 is interesting. First off, you have actually this little dialogue at the beginning that tells you that you should kill Mensa soldiers but capture Lancer soldiers, or maybe the other way around. No matter. It's actually introduced capturing in a cool way for that dialogue, but whatever. Like, it already introduces you with a bit of a side objective to capture some people and kill others, but especially you start with more than 1 unit. You actually start with 2 axe fighters, a swordmaster, a lance knight, and Leaf himself, and later you will also get an archer, a warrior, Dagda, and finally the meme himself, Marty. So, in the first chapter alone, you will get 8 units from the start. That's already a lot. That's really impressive and engaging. Probably that alone makes it one of the best first chapters in the whole series. But as a bonus to that, you also have villages to visit. Not to say because they're not actually threatened. But that means you already have side objectives to do in this chapter alone. Which means we can also get some really cool stuff from it. You can get the infamous Poogie axe. Poogie. You can also get a Brave Axe that is really cool to train up Marty or to make him good from the get-go. And you can also get some rare vulnerabilities, an Iron Sword, and you can even get a stat boosters right from the start. That's crazy. You can get a life ring right away. Like, you already get a bunch of stuff, a bunch of cool stuff from the start, and it already feels like this game is different from the others. It already engages you right away. You're already into the more complex map design that is Thracia from the start. It really is an excellent introduction to, well, how diverse and varied and overall great the map design of Thracia is. So that's why I really, really, really like this chapter. Even if it's not the most complex one there to a series, but when you compare the first introduction chapters, this is definitely the best one. Anyways, what do you think? I rambled enough about it.
It's interesting to me that when you make that distinction between Thracia's really big, complicated first chapter and other Fire Emblem's really simple first chapters, it's more of like a line in time than it is, Thracia being different than other stuff, right? All the Kaga games had a large opening chapter. I was impressed when I sat down to the first Fire Emblem, how big the map of Talus was compared to what I was expecting of the kind of dinky usual first Fire Emblem chapter. I grew up on playing the original Fire Emblem, aka Fire Emblem 7. And I think it's kind of a paradigm shift in what, I guess, how the first chapter goes about the job it has to do, right? Because I think the designers have always approached the first chapter of Fire Emblems thinking that this has to be the chapter where you learn how to play the game. You learn all the central mechanics you need to know to survive from here on out without the game holding your hand. And all first chapters do that. The difference is the way they do it. For the Kaga, for the time in which Mr. Kaga was at the helm of the series, which is from the first through Thracia, what he would do is not give you dialogue that really told you what to do, but let the game teach you how to do it. So by the act of playing the chapter, stuff happened, which is why once you add all the tons and tons and tons of like small mechanics that Thracia does, you have to have kind of an expansive chapter that's cleverly paced out and with the right features in the right place and the right enemy soldiers at the right times to actually teach you from experience what you're supposed to be doing. Where I think the line between that and just 2 Fire Emblems later when we go into Blazing Sword with the Lyn chapter that you were mentioning, which is Lyn on your side and 2 Red Brigands, like the difference between that isn't so much that it's teaching you something different. They both want to teach you how to play Fire Emblem. The difference is that in Lyn's chapter, she tells you how to play Fire Emblem in dialogue. She is giving you what you always hear, decried in modern talk about games. She is giving you a tutorial in writing rather than teaching you by having you play through the game. And I mean, we can have different opinions on what of those are more or less successful, but I think the difference you're seeing there is the fact that Thracia wants to teach you by doing rather than by talking.
Yeah, I think for example, what you just said, the tutorial is very obvious in Blazing, so it's really obvious. They teach you like you need to do this and not this and not like it's really like written explicitly. It also features a lot of pop-up text and it's annoying. Like you just want to play the game on subsequent playthroughs and you just want to move on from all this fill of text and it just gets on your nerves. But Thracia doesn't do that because it teaches you without those pop-ups. That's exactly what you brought up. So yeah, I agree. TLDR, I agree.
Yeah, this is something I noticed when I started doing my map design series is that some games, they really want to hold your hand and they treat the player like an idiot. That's me quoting Don 151. Thracia thankfully doesn't fall into that trap. It doesn't do that. And I think that it benefits from it in the long term. It makes it much more fun to replay. And we were all able to learn, so it's clear-cut proof you don't need to be explicitly told what to do. And I think in the comments, too, someone even brought up how it's sort of a twist on normal Fire Emblem conventions, because in most first chapters, it's the Sword Lord versus bandits. In this, you are the bandits, and you're attacking enemy soldiers and organized enemy army. That's actually kind of cool.
You actually literally get a bandit in the first chapter.
Yep. I was going to say that Thracia really turns the previous games and eventually the ones to come after on its head with its opening chapter. With the fact you get the brigand instead of fighting a brigand.
Our God and Savior, Marty.
Marty the meme.
Have fun with that zero-base skill and speed, but I swear he's a good unit. Really is actually.
Well, yeah, that's something for later down the line, I guess. Or we kind of already touched on the balancing. Yeah, long story short, Marty is perfectly viable to be trained up.
He already gets Brave Axe if you want to give it to him. He can actually one-on-one enemies if you with that
Mm-hmm.
if you're in for it. And besides, scrolls. You
Yep.
can fix his skill and speed.
But
And he gets one heck of a promotion too.
yeah,
Oh
he
my
basically
God, his
gets
promotion.
Sage promotion gains. Yeah.
6 skill
Promotion
and 6
gains-
speed. Oh my
Yep.
God.
But
It reminds me of the Sage promotion gains, where they're similar.
that's what I said. He literally gets like Sage promotion games.
Yeah.
In fact, let me just, while we're talking about him, before we move on to what Grant wants to talk about, he gets he gets 3 strength, 1 magic, 5 skill, 6 speed, 3 defense, 1 build, an axe rank, and he gains E rank bows.
Even bows, that's well, you shouldn't. Bows are not that great because they're still stuck in 2 range. But besides that, it's just a
But-
really good promotion.
It's that
So-
one build point. That's what he really needs, though.
Speaking of
Definitely.
brigands, Grant.
I see what you did there.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep,
Lol.
chapter freaking 4. So, I'm not gonna lie, it's really hard to pick a favorite Thracia chapter because I love so many of them. But I picked chapter 4 for multiple reasons. The first one, when it boils down to it, is that it's the perfect combination between story and gameplay. From a story perspective, this is the first massive plot twist and curveball that the game throws at you. You think you're winning, you've just saved all these kids from this fortress, you've beaten back bandits multiple times, and then what happens? Rhetoric shows up and he's like, surrender or I'm gonna kill Nana Maria, and you're like, oh crap!
It's like big
and then
kick in the balls, basically.
yeah. And then not only that, but most of your party leaves, and then the few remaining characters who stay, their stuff is now in treasure chests, and you're in a jail cell. That is such a big, bold move, and I respect Thracia for pulling that off. And then, not only that, but the chapter itself
Must have
is
been
just
pretty hard
so-
to code too. Like, might as well had that. Like, programming all of this to work must have been a bit of a pain in the ass when you think about it. Anyways, go on.
Chapter 4 is so amazingly designed because there are so many different things you have to do, and you could get punished for doing them wrong. For example, it gives you children, or at least NPCs, that have to escape. And then in return, you get 4X, where you get the almighty Asval. And then
Yes.
you have enemy soldiers continuously harassing you until the end of the game. You also have to get all your stuff back. And Leaf doesn't even start with his weapons. He's in a jail cell. You have to bust him out.
Yes,
then, of course-
nothing.
And then, of
Nothing.
course, this is the chapter that gave birth to the legendary Green Brigand.
Woo!
Who I'm pretty sure, like, everyone knows this by now, but the Green Brigand, at least in my stream Thracia playthrough, that was, he's just this random NPC. He captures one of these enemy soldiers. He was already kicking butt and taking names, but then he captures a soldier and he's still fighting off enemies. Meanwhile, I'm just, like, at the top of the map. I'm just trying to run away. That's another great design feature of Thracia, is that you still have to escape. So somehow you manage to get your treasure and you manage to get the NPCs to escape. Now what do you got to do? You still have to go through this little narrow choke point, and all these enemies are coming at you. Meanwhile, the enemies behind you are still spawning like crap.
They can still catch up to you if you're not good enough. That's it.
Yeah. So it pressures you to move forward. It works as a turtle disincentive. That's why that chapter gets like an 11 out of 10 rating for me. Highest rating possible, pass.
It's like a pass plus, if anything.
Pass plus, there we go. Reverse pass.
I just remember the biggest impression in chapter 4 was just it opening onto, like you said, everybody stuck in a dungeon. It is such a bold move for an RPG to give you negative progress like that. Because, like, what's the unifying feature of any RPG, any Fire Emblem you've ever played? It's that over time you build up a team. You, like, make what you've got better. You accumulate stuff for them. They get better and better. More people join, but it's never a thing where, like, part of that army leaves. I think one of the really cool things Thracia does without even having to say how cool it is it just, like, takes the rug out from under you for three, possibly 4 chapters at that point. You've just been building up and up and up, and it's looking like any RPG, and then suddenly, bam, you have nothing. You have absolutely nothing. And that's, as an experienced RPG player or strategy game player at that point, just the visual impact of that at the beginning of the chapter is huge.
It is. It's hard. It's.
It is also hard. That is also true.
Yeah, it's one of.
So what?
It's pretty much the
what do you
first
think,
chapter in the game that really lives up to Thracia's difficulty hype, I'd say.
That's
Like-
the simple answer. I probably really don't care. You can probably ask me anything. If I don't want to answer, I'm not going to answer.
Guy?
Yeah, that's not me.
Grant?
No. Yeah, that was my roommate. Just walked through my room. Anyway.
Okay.
Pay them no heed.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, what do you think about the chapter, Guy?
I really like Chapter 4. I started to pick it, but I figured I'd let someone else tackle it because there's one later on I really, really have to talk about. But Chapter 4, I think, is I think it's very well made on its own merit, first off. And like you all said, I'll echo you for a moment. It's a very bold move for a lot of reasons. It really pulls the rug out from under you, not just, for the game itself, because so you seized this hard to take down fort and then suddenly, just kidding, you're in prison. But like John said, for the RPG fan, you've gone from, your upward slope of player empowerment to nothing. But I don't really have much else to say that you guys didn't already say. Long story short, it's a great map. It's a great part of the game, and I think it's
amazing map.
If you weren't impressed with the first couple of maps, I feel this is where the game is going to either make you sink your teeth into it, or drive you away with your tail between your legs.
That's definitely. I was about to say that's definitely the impact it had on me, but I'm not talking about running away with my tail between my legs. Like, this is where I really started getting into this stuff.
Away this chapter.
Well, see,
it's true.
I went through both states personally. The first time I played it, this was really where I got scared, because the first couple of maps I was feeling good, not too bad. It's not. I don't see what the big deal is. Then Chapter 4 hits, and I'm like, oh, that's what they meant.
That's what they meant, indeed.
But when, like I said earlier, I went back through it again and paid attention to what the purpose of everything was. Chapter 4's purpose to me felt like it was raising the narrative stakes, which for Thracia's standards, Leaf being in prison it's a pretty high stake, and it's something that the series hasn't really ever done before. You're always the hero leading the charge, breaking people out of prison, saving them from executions. But here, you have this third-party group coming in to save Leaf. So that was probably the most impactful thing specifically about Chapter 4 for me, compared to other games in the series.
Now that I think about it, that is a big departure just in terms of, like, the form of every Fire Emblem before it. Because if you think about it, if you've been playing Fire Emblem since the NES, like, what have you seen? This is the end of the first act for Leaf. What have you seen at the end of first acts before? In the first Fire Emblem, you've moved up the Arcanaean Peninsula and taken over Arliss. In the second Fire Emblem, you have marched from a little town in the middle of nowhere to overthrow a tyrant who, is ruling a kingdom, and you've taken his throne back. In the third Fire Emblem, of course, I've been competent to talk about who.
In the third Fire Emblem, you have been baited out by a former ally and branded as a traitor, and you're now on the run.
Interesting. So it does have a parallel. I guess it's
Sort
just
of.
it's interesting to me in that in this particular Fire Emblem, the end of the first act is such a huge impression of loss. For the first 3 chapters, you're building up like it's anything else, like it's this young hero going to go topple some enemy that he really hates, and things are looking good, and things are looking good, and then he actually gets there, and man, is he unprepared for anything. And the end of the first act is just him trying to put his life together, trying to on the run for it. It's really a noticeable tonal shift from other Fire Emblems before that, which plays right into the theme that Thracia is getting at, which is that Leaf loses a whole bunch, and that is central to his personality. We can get there when we talk about the story.
Yes. So, I guess I was the last one to talk about Chapter 4, but Grant, you have a couple more you want to mention before anyone else gets a turn.
Or should we just jump to our favorites? I'm not sure.
No. Let's jump to our favorites first, and then afterwards we can jump through a couple.
Okay. Well, then my favorite would be next up. We're going quite a bit down the line. We're jumping all the way to Chapter 14, Open Fire.
Prepare for some circle jerk, guys. Prepare for some circle jerk.
This is my favorite chapter in the entire series, full stop, for a few reasons. Firstly, because, like we were getting at with the stakes being raised in Chapter 4, this is the highest they are. We are defending the last free city on the entire continent from the Granville Empire, and their hordes upon hordes of soldiers. And they have the Loctirian cult backing them up to boot. And then, eventually, even the kingdom of Thracia comes to back them up. So literally the entire world is against us. And we're just holed up here in this modest-sized city with modest defenses, where its citizens aren't even very happy living here because of all the crap that's going on in the world around them.
Like, you can see how each citizen is like, I want to leave because the Empire is always pursuing us, and a lot of the life conditions are really shit and blah blah blah. Which also actually affects the current chapter in a cool way, but you may want to mention that later. Go on.
Another special thing about Open Fire is it is the first defense map in the entire franchise. And I personally love defense maps because they kind of flip the way you play the game on their head. Most other chapters in the series, especially in the games leading up to Thracia, particularly its direct predecessor, in Holy War, you were always going somewhere. You were always conquering. You were marching off, riding off into the distance to a new castle, a new frontier, for the glory of Granville. Here, you are holed up in a walled city with the enemies coming to conquer you. So everything this game's predecessor, everything that the Arcanea games built up to, is flipped entirely on its head in this one chapter. And on top of that, I think it's just a fun chapter. It's just a well-designed chapter. You have
it is.
plenty of choke points to keep watch over, although if you're smart, you can narrow that number down a little bit and not have to deal with too terribly much. But there's reason to go outside the walls in this chapter, to brave the frontier, so to speak. There's houses on the outskirts of town that give very good weapons for you. There's ballistas just outside the walls firing at you, and the enemies can break down parts of the wall with virtually no effort. So
yeah, it puts you is that it puts you pressure like immediately and almost consistently through the whole chapter.
The pressure is immense in this chapter, and
it is. I was extremely stressed at each time. Like, at each moment, I was afraid that each little decision will make me fuck up. I was like, it was stressing but so engaging. It was just wow. Basically,
Every time I play this chapter, I cannot look away from the screen. This is the part of my gaming career that always engrosses me. 30 plus times playing this game later, and I still get that same rush, that same adrenaline rush, that same tension from this chapter, and that's kind of personal, but I think that really speaks to how well it conveys what it's supposed to me. So, what do you guys think?
Concur, absolutely. Open Fire is so good. It's such a cool chapter. It's just Thracia has a great way of making act breaks into set pieces. I'm going to talk about another act break, but Open Fire I consider to be the end of the second act, and it's just the way tension has come to a head as you know, as part of the story by that point is really effective at making Open Fire feel going into it like it's going to be something big, and then actually playing it is something big. You get hit by, as you said, like the experience of just all the troops coming at you and coming at you and coming at you for 10 plus turns is a lot to take in. I really like how I feel like I'm just going to be echoing Guy on this point because he spoke
Go
about
right
it so
ahead.
well. But like
it's fine.
I love how it's modular in a way. A lot of Fire Emblem Defense maps are modular in the sense that I mean, which is to say that like you have a very simple objective that you have to do. You have probably a second string of secondary objectives that you might like to do that take a little bit more effort, and then there is an ultimate objective that you could do if you really want to. It's a lot of reward, but it's a lot of risk. And I think like Open Fire lays that out perfectly, right? Because you can, if you wanted to, the way you can approach it is just sit in the town and guard the town hall. That's all you need to do to win. Just survive their 10 turns. You don't even need to walk at all into the city. Let them come channel down into the roads between the houses and fight you there. All you have to do is just stand still and not move. You could do that. Or, if you wanted to, in order to get the bonus chapter right after that, you have to save a certain number of civilians. And you can also hire a new person if you go into one of the houses with a certain person. So, like, there's kind of stuff to be done
also
within
one of the best
levels
units
if
in
you
the game,
want
I
to.
might add.
I didn't use Homer, so I wouldn't know. But possibly.
You
Maybe he
missed
is.
out big time. Seriously.
I got him captured so I could go to 21X. But so like that's like a second string of things you can do, right? You can, if you want to, visit the houses and accomplish that while still defending from stuff outside the walls. But then there are the houses outside the walls. And that's kind of like that third string of, if you want to, you can do this. And it just makes so many interesting decisions because of that. Like, if you want to accomplish as much as you can in Open Fire, it is all on you. You are taking a huge risk, and you have no one but yourself to blame for it. And for that reason, you have to, get a little bit clever about how you survive all the stuff that's going to happen to you when you do. Also add to that the fact that it's a battle of like 3 different armies, each of which has an opposing motivation. Like, the Thracians aren't really the allies of the Frege troops. They take the city out of Granville hands, in fact. It's such a cool chapter.
Speaking of army thing, just a little trivia tidbit, because I love these little trivia things. This doesn't affect too much, but Dean and Etta join on this map. They, gameplay-wise, technically are not yet considered part of Leaf's army. They are considered still part of the Thracian army, which gameplay-wise means your leadership stars don't affect them.
Wow, really?
Just a little trivia thing. Doesn't, change the theming of the map or anything like that, but just thought I'd intersperse that in there.
Can I also say, while we're on the subject of Open Fire, because there's so much that's going on in this chapter, I really like the enemy commanders in this chapter. I feel like anyone who's familiar with me talking about Fire Emblem has heard this saw from me at this point, but one of the things I find most compelling about any Fire Emblem thematic message is the way in which the enemy commanders, like, talk, the way they come off, the way they are characterized. I think Fire Emblem makes a ton of points with a very little dialogue just by giving the enemy commanders certain character in certain situations. And I love Paul of Frege, who is the commander of the army against you in open fire. I think he's awesome because he's a really genuinely good guy, and like you can see him. One of the really interesting things is that the obvious counterpoint to him, there are two other generals of Frege who you see kind of in parallel to him, right? There's Rist in the previous chapter, who gets orders to hold off attacking Tara and marches on it anyway. There is, I forget his name, with a white beard in open fire, who is kind of the ground lieutenant who's commanding the Knight Battalion.
That is Baldak.
Baldak, thank you. Baldak is the guy. And he's kind of like a straight by the book, no nonsense sort of person. And he's the one that brings up what Rist did to Paul, and he says, look, this guy just disobeyed his orders, what a goofus. And Paul's reaction is not what you might typically expect of a Yggdrali person at this point, which would be just to get really angry and arrogant and mean and all that stuff. Paul's reaction is to say, oh my goodness, another loss of life, when will this end? And immediately there is something totally different about this chapter, because your enemy is sympathetic, and he goes on to be like in the 2 or 3 lines of dialogue that he actually has, he goes on to be like a really compassionate person, which is really odd, and it just puts the rest of Open Fire in this neat light where like there's this Phrygian commander, you've have a great deal of experience with what bad people from Frege are like at this point, but like he's genuinely a good guy, and that just adds another layer of complexity to the situation that comes to a head at Tara.
Yeah, Paulus is one of those one-off chapter bosses that sticks with me. Most people see most of these guys as kind of throwaway, but Paulus, to me, doesn't really fit that mold for all of the reasons you listed. I like how he kind of demeans himself, because I'll just read off what he says and let the audience see what they think. His line at the start of the chapter is, I was never in favor of the attack on Tara. My hesitation has led many soldiers to their deaths. It's my responsibility. Laugh at me, Baldak. Laugh at this old coward.
Wow.
What a good man.
I just remembered this line. It makes so much sense now.
And of course, the immediate parallel you have to that is Leaf, right? Because Leaf is the only other voice for mercy, for capturing people and letting them go, that you've heard in this entire game up to that point. You've played almost half of it. And then here's, this Phrygian High General just saying, oh my goodness, this is all on me, what have I done? It's incredible.
So Grant, what do you think?
Before Grant gives his spiel, I have another piece of trivia for you all. Taken from the Fire Emblem Wiki, Paulus is apparently named after Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus from World War II. He was a German general who tried and failed to siege and take Stalingrad, and he was captured by the Russians moments after his promotion. And then he became a critic of the war effort from that point forth, because he was allowed to live and continue speaking.
That's pretty cool.
Shit.
That is really neat.
So, Grant, with that little trivia piece in mind, go ahead and give your thoughts.
Defense chapters are kind of one of those things where I have to kind of try and separate my head and my heart, because I feel like I've been listening to a lot of LTC players just bash defense chapters, and it's like, okay, fine, I see where you're coming from. I see how they can easily trivialize. I even saw Ronaldo's video where he basically trivialized 14, but for me, I still enjoyed playing them. I still enjoy playing Chapter 14 because defense maps usually are great when it comes to atmosphere. I love what's going on in the store, and I do appreciate everything that happens. And I had no idea, and I had forgotten about Paulus and about that little line. That's actually pretty cool. But I guess with Chapter 14, it's good. It's not my favorite, but I mean, I get why people love and enjoy it so much. I still think it's one of the more enjoyable defense maps in the series.
Wait, is it my turn? I was just not sure. Well,
Well,
I think
go ahead, Ollie.
I think I can't really add much that wasn't said before by any of you. This chapter is just one of the best in the game, if not the best for arguably, if not arguably the best, because well, it's really intense. It has charismatic bosses for once. It has multiple alliances. It has a nice story background behind it. It has some. You can do more than just defend, but with a really great risk attached to it, and yeah, it just nails most of all of Fire Emblem the map design principles really well. It's just wow. Guy, I really see why you circle jerk this chapter so much, because it really is an amazing one. That's all I have to say, really. Just fantastic all around. I think we can move on, really. Open Fire is amazing.
Ollie, out of curiosity, was this going to be the one that you said was your favorite?
One of the ones, that's for sure. That would definitely have been one of my picks. But yeah, it's.
I like that answer. How can I choose?
So yeah, next one, John. It's actually your turn. Let's talk about your favorite chapter.
Chapter 18.
Your favorite
Chapter
in the game.
18, The Liberation of Leinster. Yeah, so let's see. So this is, in keeping with our theme so far, this is another act break. This is the end of the third act. So we've gone through the first act where Leif marches on Manster and gets just totally destroyed, turned away at the gate, and has to run for his life. In the second act, Leif instead makes a march to rescue Tara, and that comes to a head in open fire. 3 armies end up facing off. Leif's is by far and away the worst of them. Leif gets run out. Thracia takes Tara, and Leif is on the run, runs more. So, in the third act, Leif sets his sights on kind of the biggest conquest he's planned so far, the most important to him. It's kind of the one you've expected, that's been coming this whole time. Leif is the Prince of Leinster. He's been turned out by the Granvilian occupation force, and so the lead up to chapter 18 is that he's marching back on his birthright castle, going back to the land where he was born to finally take it back, as he has been entitled to do. And then the chapter that you get is inside of a castle, and it's in 2 halves. And the reason that everybody probably hates this one is the reason I love it so much. So there are
I'm really interested to hear why, because go on.
There are these 2 processes that are going on in parallel on this map, right? On the right-hand side, there are a bunch of Leinsterite soldiers. The kind of the common theme you see going into this chapter is that there is a certain body of Leinsterite soldiers who have been impressed into service by the Granvilian military, and where possible, once again in keeping with Leif's theme of mercy, what you want to do is you want to avoid casualties to them, and you get various rewards for doing that. The reward on the right side for essentially having mercy is you get the VIP card for the secret shop later on. Your reward on the left side for the process that constitutes having mercy is you get a new recruit for it. So the mechanical way in which this plays out is that you get these 2 fiddly little puzzles going on in parallel. What I really like about them is that the game puts them in parallel. Like I just said, there are 2 things you have to think about going on at the same time. That's what I really like. I've always liked fiddly little puzzles in Fire Emblem, I guess, but only where you have to consider them as part of a bigger whole that's going on. One of the first things that come to mind, I guess, in the series of the game doing this is in Arcanea Palace in the first Fire Emblem when you're marching on that, and there's this kind of sideshow with the Arcanean prisoners who are all unarmed, and you have to kind of try to hide them in the right step in the prison cell so that the right people are shooting the right people at the right times. That's the kind of like little thing to think about that's going on the side of the main action that I really like to see in a lot of chapters. Like, it's kind of like little entertaining bits like that. On chapter 18, weirdly for it being the end of an act, is both entertaining bits and big confrontation. And the way it does this is that, like, the center room into which both of the halves of chapter 18 lead is the throne room of Leinster. And there's Gustav sitting on the throne, and right in front of him is Xavier, flanked by just legions of heavily armed knights. And that looks like it's leading to this big confrontation where, you know, you're going to face off with this room full of heavy troopers and smash your way to victory, take the throne, be glorious. But the way Leaf does it, or at least the way the game encourages you to do it, one of the things I like about this is that you could ignore this and just fight them. But the way the game encourages you to do it is quintessentially Leaf. Take mercy on virtually everybody in the situation. Like, if you can capture and release all the soldiers on the right side, you get the reward anyway without having to fight them. And if on the left side you go through the crazy, ridiculous process of hooking up the civilians with their friend who's been impressed into the army, like, you can also recruit Xavier just by taking mercy on people. I love how that echoes just the same person Leaf has been throughout this entire journey. The lives of Leinsterite are something he prioritizes above everything, and he manages to turn the climactic conflict in this entire game, the recapture of his home country, into just taking mercy on people, saying, you know, you're absolved of fighting against me, and letting them keep their lives. So I think another reason this stands out to me particularly are the characters who are involved in it. So I think it would be one thing if that were just, you know, the mechanic that happens, but you also get to see these conversations between the civilians and their friends who are being impressed into the Granvillian service, right? You also get to see the kids telling their dads, it's all right, you don't need to fight anymore. You also get to see this old lady telling this old guy, look, it's fine, you can come home now. Like, there's a real emotional impact to seeing the civilians saying, put down your arms, war is over.
Actually, I want to bring that up, what you mentioned, that is that what I like is that generic civilians actually feel more real than ever in Thracia, because, well, they have unique face sprites, but also you can actually see them talk with some generic soldiers, and sometimes, well, some random units that you know, like, generic civilians feel like actual human beings for once, which I don't think was ever seen before, maybe even after, in any other Fire Emblem game that I remember. Like, civilians, they feel like people, not just objectives, if you see what I mean.
For sure. Yeah, it's incredible that in a game that puts that is like kind of consciously constructed to not involve a lot of dialogue, how much characterization of people like that makes a huge difference. And also, I'll say the other character that stands out to me quite a lot from the 18th chapter is, as you may expect, given that it's me, the enemy commander is an interesting person himself, and in quite the opposite way that Paulus was, right? Paulus impressed me as this really good guy put in this horrible position who feels genuine remorse. Gustav, by contrast, is just a cowardly, petty tyrant, fearful for his own life, sitting on the throne. And that adds another bit of color to it, because, like, it's really interesting that Leaf's first big victory, because again at the end of the other acts he's just lost in grand fashion. But the person that he overthrows to achieve his victory in the third act, to take back the land of his fathers, again, it looks like it's this big confrontation coming up. It looks like it's this huge set piece. And it turns out that not only does he, have mercy on the people leading up to it, not only does he resolve things mostly diplomatically, but Gustav himself, you would expect this strong, imposing figure who leads the enemy army. No, Gustav is a total coward who tries to wheedle the throne in his last moments. He's just totally detestable, and I think that makes conquest again seem less than you expected, which is more interesting.
Hey, kind of like Raydrig.
Fair.
Just a big coward.
Although Raydrig wants promotion, Gustav is where he is sitting on the
Starting to
throne,
have some
and that's a problem for him.
issues right now. That's odd. God damn it.
Uh-oh.
Well,
Oh boy, this...
Hey, Ollie,
Okay,
I can still hear you.
I can hear
The
you. I can hear
microwave,
you.
my microwave
All right.
downstairs is getting
Let's,
active, so the internet might be shaky for a few minutes. Be prepared to get cut off.
No, dear. All right. Well, let's give you
Sorry
a
about that, guys.
moment.
Really sorry.
Let's give you a moment to deal with that. Grant, what do you think about Chapter 18?
I guess I never really thought about it the way you have.
Actually,
You clearly
guys, you may want to stop talking. I don't think OBS is connected right now. Just take a few seconds off. I'll tell you when you'll be able to speak again. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm really sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good for now. Go on, Grant. Go
Okay.
On, go on.
So I always thought of this as Xavier's chapter, and I've never bothered trying to recruit Xavier because he's way too difficult, and it doesn't seem like he gives a legitimate payoff for it. But I guess you've been doing a good job of trying to get me to look at it in a different light before. I don't think I have as much to add. Good job.
Okay, so
Thanks. Some side to it, but
Interference
if
again.
it's not your favorite chapter, that's cool too.
I think we're having some interference again. Oh my god, guys.
By the way, where's Guy?
I'm right here.
Okay, good. Woo!
I'm just listening.
I'm not sure
Okay.
the stream. Guys, oh, for fuck's. Okay, it's fitting because actually the near the defeat music is playing and now chaos is happening to the stream because of my microwave downstairs. So I'm just wow. Okay,
Sias showed up and gave the microwave 5 stars of leadership.
10. 10. Oh my god.
It's Sias.
Okay, we have interference. This is problematic. I think we're good now. You know what? I'll just say my thoughts on the chapter right away. I too did not bother to recruit Xavier because I thought it was too much trouble. And honestly, like both side quests of the chapter did not really interest me because there's only one secret card in the whole chapter, and wait, what did I say? Wait, I just lost my voice. Yeah, both rewards for this chapter did not really interest me because there's only one secret chapter in the game, and as a bonus, well, Xavier doesn't seem like that much of a good unit. It's when I could just steal his stuff or capture him and get all his sword for him. I don't know. This chapter, I'm not really a big fan of, to be quite honest. Sorry, John. I don't really see it.
It's all good. You don't have to like everything I do. I figured this would be like a divisive chapter just because it's it's unusual. Its main focus isn't a big battle, even though it's at like a big place in the game.
Okay, I think we're good. Maybe. Oh wait, Guy, you still have to talk about it. Sorry.
I'm in agreement with John. I like this chapter a lot, but that's to be expected. I don't really have much to say that John didn't already cover, but what do I want to say is the question. I think the thing that sticks out to me about Xavier, even though I like this chapter, is kind of a negative thing. I have recruited him before. I don't always, but I have. The problem I have with him, gameplay-wise, is the fact that his main appeal is an indoor lance user, but he has an E rank in lances.
Oh yeah, that's a big bummer right there. He should have had a better line right to maybe make his nation stand out, really.
But as a character and for what the chapter as a whole he appears in means for the story, I'm in full agreement with John. This is a very good moment, and the options it gives you, the approach it leans you towards, and the way you have to go about getting Xavier if you want him speaks for the kind of person that Leaf is. And like, even though this is his homeland, this is the castle that he was born in, that he never really got the chance to grow up in because of horrible circumstances, he doesn't really hold ill will towards the people occupying it. He wants to do what he can to get these people out of their scummy situation without bloodshed if he can. So that, to me, is probably the biggest takeaway from Chapter 18.
Totally. Leaf respects life in general. That's continues to set him apart from a lot of other people who are there for, honor or winning. He is there to save people's lives.
Yep, can't really add much to that again. Anyways, that's pretty much our favorites, but we have some other chapters to discuss that while aren't our favorites, still wanted to touch about. So, great, we have one to talk about right now.
Are we gonna go in order of these again, or just kind of do whatever? Because if we're going in order, Grant is up next.
We don't have to talk about all of mine, by the way. I feel like I've gone a little overboard, but at least these are some ideas I had about chapters I want to talk.
Whichever one you really want to talk about, I'll say. Go ahead.
All right. Since we just talked about Chapter 18, I thought it'd be nice to kind of go to the chapter that comes after that, Chapter 19, Remorse and Retaliation. So, in a similar vein to Chapter 4, this is a map that works from both a story and a gameplay perspective. Story-wise, Leaf has just been dealt a really major blow. This is where Dorias lost his life, and Leaf is now sprawling, and you, the player, have to just recover and recuperate from this. It's also a really creative defense map because it starts with Leaf right next to the escape tile. If this were any other Fire Emblem game, this would be like a Birthright level escape map, but here, thanks to Thracia's escape escape mechanic, it actually works really, really well. It also gives you little NPCs to rescue. You have recruitable units just to make things more complicated. This was also the birth of the Green Troubadour. This, because I recruited, I think it was Amalda, and then her troubadour, and then one of her troubadours, I think it attacked a ballista and dodge tanked a whole bunch of enemies before going down. And again, this was the one where I was like, holy cow, this Thracia's really got some creative juices going. And meanwhile, while you're trying to just flee from these cavaliers who will charge at you, and you have to get creative about how to get out of their range. So yeah, again, it's like Chapter 4 in the sense that the game just pulls the rug out under you, and you have to deal with a very creative and well-designed map, and that's something that's always stuck out to me.
One thing I love about Chapter 19 particularly is that we've just finished Chapter 18. Hey, I just talked about that. But like Chapter 18 particularly is Leaf's first big victory, right? At the end of the first act, he loses horribly. At the end of the second act, he holds out for as long as he can and then loses terribly. At the end of the third act, it's like the biggest victory he's wanted to have the whole time. He wins. And what does he do immediately after that? Turns right around, loses his most trusted advisor's life, and has to run away by losing horribly immediately in the next chapter. It's just, it keeps that pressure on Leaf that he's had on him since the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. So, Chapter 19 for me is a very fun map. As it is,
it's a great map to play.
I have some more trivia that kind of gets into what it could have been, what it was initially imagined to be. I'll say it that way. But for what it is, I think it's great. It sets up, like John said, another kick in the teeth to Leaf. And I think it's a really creative map in particular because of your unit's formation. You start with about half of your deployed units closer to the bottom of the map, away from Leonster Castle, away from the escape point. So it's not so much just, well, you can take it two ways. You can take it the Leaf way, or you can take it the easy way. The easy way would be to just have the people near Leonster go back into Leonster and screw everyone else. The Leaf way is to get everyone back safely. And I really like that. I also like how your choice of route split kind of comes to fruition, so to speak, here, because you can get one of two paladins depending on which route you went, and they can be recruited by their love interest. And both of those dialogues, potential dialogues, are interesting to me, but one of the, I guess it's kind of countercurrent to the mood of this chapter as a whole, but it sticks out to me for that reason. If you went the A route, you can get Amalda by talking to her with Sloof, and I think it's funny, kind of, the way he talks to her, so to speak, so I think it's worth mention. I pulled up the dialogue just to read it off. So Sloof initiates the conversation. He says, "Lady Amalda, withdraw your blade. It is I, Sloof." And she's like, "Well, what are you doing here?" So then he says, "My lady, I've come for you. The Liberation Army is waiting for you." Like, he's just talking himself up, which really just kind of sticks out to me in a funny way because, like, Dorius just died. Everyone else is running for their lives, and he's just here trying to, romance up a enemy paladin.
Yeah, when you see like that, it's pretty funny, but yeah.
So that I thought that was worth mention. Plus, I like Amalda a lot as a character. But so overall, Chapter 19, I think it does really well what it wants to do, and it's really creative. It's unique. It's something the series hasn't really tried again. And I wish if they can bring back the way escape works in Thracia and make that, work with the game that they put it back into, I would love to see them do something like this again.
For sure.
My turn. Sorry. Okay, so about Chapter 19, I actually think Chapter 19 is really fun and really well done. Like, it's an escape chapter that is like mentioned, a cool twist of having people need to escape, but your army is divided in half, which is also mentioned in the story, by the way, which is cool. And then, well, you can choose of leaving those units behind if you want, or if you're a bastard. And well, or you could just like escape as fast as you can from all of those enemies which can have movement styles, by the way, especially fucking Connemore. Anyways. Yeah, that's because he procced the movement star on my ass once, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. And yeah, oops. And yeah, besides that, it's like you just run the fuck away, grab all the stuff you can from villages if you can, and I hope to God no one dies in the process. And it's really, just like chapter 6, which we may mention later, it puts a lot of pressure onto your army, and really, it's tense, it's like, it engages you, once again. Another Thracia chapter is really engages you to the max, It's great, it really is. And also, I will also mention that the Doria's death, spoilers, was really touching to me, because I felt like in chapters 18's ending conversation, you can really feel that Doria's sort of knew they was gonna die. Like, I don't know, but in that dialogue, it really seemed like he knew that something bad will happen to him during this charge. It really seemed like
definitely knew.
he definitely knew that this was useless. Like, well, not useless, but they will fade into this fate. You can feel in the dialogue that he knew that it will be the last time they would see Leaf in his entire life. It really hit me. It really did. And man, well, yeah, chapter 19 is great. I agree. So yeah, what's the next one we want to talk about now?
Well, before we move on to the next chapter, I kind of wanted to. This kind of ties into something we're gonna talk about later, which is why I wanted to bring up this trivia fact. One of the questions John wrote up for us was, does Thracia add to your reading of Holy War or vice versa? So here's sort of a hypothetical, a what could have been, that I'm going to run down for y'all. There is unused data in the coding of the game for Princess Ishtar.
Oh yeah,
She,
I remember you.
This chapter 19, she was initially slated to appear as a recruitable boss.
Oh yeah, yes. Apparently
Right.
she was very, very strong. Like you said, like
Yes.
she was probably
She
the
had
best character you could
really
have.
good bases and growths and all of that cool stuff. They even the game's coding also still has Mjolnir programmed in specifically for her. Like they altered its properties from Holy War. It's
Just
and
like
it's-
Steady Soul Steady, basically.
Yes, yeah. So, to sort of go into what we're going to be discussing later, had they kept this aspect of this chapter, Ishtar being a capturable, recruitable boss here, how would you have felt that added to or subtracted from this chapter and the game as a whole?
Sorry, I wasn't listening for a few seconds. What did you say?
Had they kept Ishtar here as a recruitable boss via capture, how do you feel it would have added to or subtracted from this chapter and the game as a whole?
Speaking from my own point of view, I think it would certainly have changed the tone of that chapter, right? Because, like, to me, this is the chapter, thanks to Dorius's march to death that he knew was coming. It just adds such a tragic feel to like the huge victory that Leaf just had. That's how I see it. So if we had Ishtar come in, able to, you know, join the army and add a gigantically powerful magic book into it, I just feel like I can see why they took her out, if that's why they took her out, because it would feel like more of a victory than it should. That's my take.
There's a part of me that would have screamed and shouted in joy if Ishtar had been recruitable, but on the other hand, we already have Seti as your in-game, Gateau, having Ishtar and Seti would have made Thracia a little too easy, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a
What?
good point right there. Like,
Yeah, go on.
no, I have nothing to say. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I thought you were saying more. Yeah. And then I don't know. I don't think it would have meshed as well with Holy War, because then it would have just raised the plot hole. Okay, why didn't she just eventually join Seliph then?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was for the best that she wasn't recruitable. It would have been one thing if she were a boss, but recruitable.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. So that's a little tangent that I wanted to bring up because I like trivia like that, and I'm an Ishtar fanboy. But we can move on now.
We all are Ishtar fanboys. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Ishtar is darn cool. That is for sure.
Hey, she was on my favorite females list.
She
by
was
the way.
on my list too. And when we get to the comparisons to Holy War thing, I want to bring her up a little bit. But for now, other chapters we wanted to mention. Who's up next? I believe John, you're up.
I am up. Let's see. Are we going? I'm going to take us backwards a little bit, just because we've already talked about kind of the end game and how staves play into that. So, at the risk of moving us backwards in time through the game, I just want to take a quick little moment to mention a chapter I really liked from earlier. I don't have to go into it at great depth because it's not a very big map, but I think it is really well done. It's chapter 10, Knoll Canyon, on the road to Tara. I think it is definitely the most interesting use of ballistas that there are in the game. I think it feels to me like the good ballista placement they had in this map, they tried to emulate in like a bunch of the other maps into the future. So you see a lot of, overlapping ballistas covering important objectives for your people to take, ballista, or like houses that can only be reached by a flyer, but the flyer has to get hit by a ballista, so you have to kind of work a way around her being exposed to that. There's a lot of...
Karen is in extreme danger of this chapter just for that.
She is, but like you have to get her to a certain house if you want what's in it, right? So there's all these like really neat objectives they set up behind this network of ballistas. And unlike many of the other ballista chapters where the best solution is just walk one square into range with someone in heavy armor, have them take 10 hits, and then the ballista's out of ammo and you can keep going. Like this one actually has reasons for you to try to navigate the whole labyrinth of ballista coverage, because the thieves are in there, sacking towns and wrecking houses that have interesting stuff for you if you want them. And on top of that, there's also, as I'm fond of mentioning, there's also a lot of character work going on, right? Because there's Alwyn and Fred who come in and like fake you out by rushing straight at you before they turn around. Yeah, and you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with that? And then they turn around and they're like, just kidding, we'll see you later. And
just kidding. Nice.
And you have an enemy commander who also seems like a pretty good guy. He seems to be on good terms with Alwyn, listens to her, agrees that Kemp is insufferable. But like there's a neat enemy side to this. There is a neat ballista placement side to this. I think it's a really just well done little chapter on the road to Tara. The only problem I have with it is that it's placed so early in the game that every time I see ballistas after that, I'm just like measuring it against chapter 10 and it always falls short. So I wish they'd built up to it a little bit more, I guess. But it's a really nice little stop on the way. We don't have to discuss it at great length unless other people have stuff to say about it.
I don't really have too much to add. I really like chapter 10 too, though.
I don't love it personally. I mean, it's fine, but I reset it a lot in this chapter. For some reason, it gave me a lot of trouble, and I couldn't really tell you why. But I mean, it's finely designed. It has a lot of side objectives that are quite interesting, but like, maybe I just suck at the game, which is very possible. But yeah, fine chapter. I appreciate what it does, but I'm not a big fan of it.
I have a feeling that many conversations I have about Fire Emblem just end with me saying, maybe I'm just really like sucky at playing Fire Emblem. So I'm with you there.
I'm really terrible at Fire Emblem, honestly, but whatever.
I love Chapter 10. I gave it the highest rating on my map design series for a reason. Like John mentioned, the ballista placement is just stellar. Thieves are threatening houses, and it's just got pretty much and it does an amazing job at providing multiple paths for the player to approach.
Oh yeah,
Not really
that is true though. I gotta agree with that.
And I do think those are all elements of really amazing map design. So yeah, 10. It gets what, 9.5 or a 10 out of 10, something like that.
9.776, I say.
I'd give it a 99% out of 100.
There are no 100% Thracia.
Right.
All right. Guy, would you like to give us a chapter of your own that you'd like to talk about?
So the other chapter I wanted to talk about was chapter 17A, Leonster's Gate.
Sias. Sorry about that.
Well, see, Sias
this
is
guy. I'm sorry. Go on.
Sias, see, you can avoid him. That's one thing. He's
You
not there
actually
from
can,
the start. The last several times I've gone through this map, I haven't seen him because I've just gone through it too quick. But
What? Wait, seriously?
yeah, I can get through this map in like 4 or 5 turns.
Yeah,
And he doesn't
I've
show
never
up
done
till,
Sias.
I believe, turn 10 or so.
Yes,
But anyway,
turn 10.
so, one of the things that stands out to me a lot about this chapter is Misha, who she is and how you get her on your side. So this kind of overlaps with a later part of the discussion where I wanted to talk about her, but the part of what I want to talk about her is the gameplay side of things, where I think her recruitment is kind of a good example of the game subtly guiding your hand and teaching you without really teaching you. Like, it's one of those ways where it makes you feel like you figured out when it's shown you examples before and you piece it together yourself. So the way you get Misha, for those who are unfamiliar, is you speak to her with Karen, and then you have to capture her and not release her, and end the map with her in being held by somebody. So the way that works, firstly, is the game assumes you're going to have your green-haired Pegasus girl talk to that green-haired Pegasus girl because they might be related or something.
Yeah, that's the natural thing to do after all.
This is, somebody talking to an enemy or an NPC on the map is par for the course at this point in the series. So then you notice, hey, she has some good equipment. Like, she has a wind sword. I haven't seen one of those before. It's the only one that you can get in the game. There's another one on B route, but obviously you can't get that if you're here. So it's like, hey, I should capture her. I should take that wind sword. I want it. And from chapter 12 where Salem put your units to sleep, hey, if you put a mounted unit to sleep, they dismount and you can capture them. So you do that. Then you figure, hey, she has a face. I might be able to get her the same way I got Lithus or I got Salem. Or I might get like a Gaiden chapter like I did with Rume back in chapter 8 if I held on to him. So you do that, you end the map, you have her in your possession. You get extra cutscene, you get her on your squad for the next map. So
I am mind blown. Seriously. I thought one side was very cryptic, but the way you put it makes sense.
See, like many things for me in this game, my reading of that changed entirely between my first playthrough and my second playthrough. My first playthrough, where I didn't really like it, by this point I was just kind of playing it to get it over with. So Misha, I was like, how are you supposed to know that? But then when I played again and I was looking into the way the game goes about telling you how to do things, I figured it out step by step. It's frankly, like, I don't. If you're paying attention to the game, I don't really think that her recruitment is that hard. It's not like Xavier's where it's a one-time thing and nothing you've done before will really prepare you for it in the gameplay sense. But like John mentioned, that has story purpose and purpose for Leaf as a character. But you haven't done anything like that in the game before Chapter 18. But here, you've done all of these things individually. Now Misha's asking you to put them together. But for the chapter as a whole, she's interesting because she charges at you right from the start. Somebody mentioned earlier there's a Lopterian over here that has a warp staff you'd like to use for yourself. If you let him use it up, he's just going to send people your way. There's really good rewards strewn about in the houses in this map. And the kicker is if you take too long, Syas shows up to rally the troops defending Leonster from your assault, and then Reinhardt sends his famous Gelbenritter, several different translations, the Gelbenritter, the Yellow Knights, after you. His Mage Knight Brigade. So if you take too long, basically they throw an anti-turtle disincentive at you, and they make it very hard to not turtle. Because Syas's presence alone gives the enemies 30% extra hit and avoid. So you have to counter that by being smart with your positioning, with your leadership use, your support use, your charisma use. And there's ballistas up by the wall of the castle. So
what I personally did, however, was that I basically did all the side objective by turn 10s, which is like recruiting Sarah, capture the dark mages and bishops, basically the villages, all that recruiting mission, all that stuff. I did all of it by turn 10, and then by turn 10, I just go through the forest at the about the center of the map and just hope to the RNG that the Armor Knights will not screw me over before they will, like 2 or 3 turns they will be attacking me into Science Leadership Stars issue.
Yeah.
Dude,
so
and then
Sarah's another thing about this map, because if you go A route, she joins you here. You get her by going to that church that's up on the little cliffside. Sarah is an interesting character and an interesting unit. She is the Est archetype of the game, and she's very good at that. So this
probably the best Est of the series, no question.
Easily the best Est in the series. So what I'm driving at with kind of reading off what the map does is I'm saying it gives you a lot to think about at once, and it wants you to do it quickly. It's kind of, I look at this map the way most traditional RPGs would look at a boss battle. It's a test of what you've learned so far. They put houses with really good rewards in your face and say, you know, you might want to save these. They give you really good units to recruit, and one of them in a way by expecting you to piece together things you've done already. So it's like, this is the map in the game where they're saying, okay, we've taught you, now show us what you learned. And that's why it really sticks out to me. And of course, another thing on the story side is it leads up to the next chapter where John already talked about it. You're taking back Leaf's homeland. This is like the build up to you're approaching the motherland. You're approaching the wind down.
I guess it's like a final test before the real battle to reclaim your homeland. Basically.
Exactly. So that's my interpretation of this map and why I like it a lot. What do you guys think?
Fuck Syas, but the map itself is nice. It has once again everything that you could look for a map. It has, well, it puts pressure onto you. You want to make as much progress as you want to in order to not get fucked by Syas. You have also nice equipment from Dark Mages and Villagers to capture. You have a great unit to recruit, Sarah. Yes, the good hairs, guys, that exist, believe me. And yeah, that's just, it's a good chapter, but one that can be very frustrating. because of science, and I don't think I need to explain why. This guy isn't famous for a reason, I'll just say that much. What a man. Anyways, what about the other two? John and Grant, what do you think?
I am a big fan of Chapter 17A. It was a lot of fun. Even though I fell victim to Sias, just like probably all of us at one point or another. He was terrifying, but it was still a ton of fun, because I think the main reason why it felt so appropriate was because, you have that scene, I guess a couple of chapters earlier, where you're picking which road to go, whether you take the left road straight up to the front door of Leinster, or whether you take the back road through the woods. And, the way they describe those two makes it's the typical conversation between August and Dorius. Dorius says, "Let's do this. This is the glorious road. Everyone will see you. You will be an inspiration to everyone." And August says, "You're going to get destroyed. Like, the road is watched by tons and tons and tons of troops. Like, the whole army is waiting for you to do exactly that." And that's the feeling you get in Chapter 17A. Like, you arrive at the gates of Leinster and everyone is there waiting for you. Like, I think it really appropriately captures what you're expecting from what people have told you leading up to that. And it's a great way, as Guy said, to set the stage for Chapter 18 being pointedly less than you expect. Oh, also I should add, the way I got Misha in my playthrough, she hit her movement stars and took another turn out in front of her entire unit, which made it really easy for me to capture her. I was very proud of myself for that one.
Nice.
Nice.
GG.
I love this chapter too. Again, like I mentioned earlier, this is the one where I had Dean capture more and gain his warp staff. I also just love the combination of everything, the different ways to approach it, the turtle disincentive that works. I even consider more with his stage to be a turtle disincentive in and of itself, because again, you want to play faster so you don't have to deal with this bullcrap. I don't remember even bothering to recruit Misha, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I do like what this chapter does in terms of gameplay, and I've always had a lot of fun with it. It got a pass on my log series.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
I agree, really. It's a great chapter, but like I said, can frustrate some players, and rightfully so. Yeah,
Indeed.
actually, I actually have a bit something to announce. We'll suddenly have to cut the stream right away, right now, due to me having a personal issue that I need to deal right away. Actually, I just need to eat, and it's pretty awkward, but I need to cut the stream right now and do the later part of it at a later date. So for those who are still watching, we will inform you on whenever we do the second part of the stream, so that
Yeah,
we'll talk about the rest of it. But for now,
We'll be back next time with more on the story and characters, and we hope to see
some
you all
other
then.
Yeah, in some other chapters that we'll need to talk about too. But we'll
Mm-hmm.
inform you about it later. But for now, I'll need to cut it
Mm-hmm.
out. But despite all of this, thank you guys a lot for watching us fanboy about Thracia 776 for the first part of it, and like we said, we'll have another podcast going on about that. We'll talk about more about the story behind Thracia 776, and well, I hope we all have fun. So, just thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
thanks.
so much.
So yeah, we'll see you later for the second part. Bye.
Bye.
So long.
Peace.
Peace.